The city crisis was over. The government threw a massive victory banquet for me and my team. Everyone was soaking in the joy, and the atmosphere was electric. I wanted to show off a bit in front of Morong Yao, but I overdid it with the drinks. Before I knew it, I was on stage performing a ridiculous dance. The whole room erupted in laughter. Morong Yao looked at me with a mix of anger and amusement, completely helpless as I made a fool of myself. The piece didn't last long. I knew stronger threats were coming, so I organized a special training session for the team. It was a disaster from the start. Some teammates lost control of their powers and turned the training ground into a chaotic mess. Others tried to slack off during physical drills, but I caught them red-handed. I handed out a series of hilarious punishments to keep them in line. Then, a mysterious invitation arrived. It was for a competition between ability users. We were all curious and a bit worried. Everyone had their own theory about what was really going on behind the scenes. Once we decided to go, the real prep work began. I tried some bizarre training methods to boost my strength, but they usually backfired, leaving everyone in stitches. The journey to the competition was just as weird. Our transport broke down halfway there, forcing us to trek on foot. Along the way, we ran into a guy claiming to be a great ability master. He was a total fraud, and we almost fell for his act. When we finally arrived, the opening ceremony was a total wreck. The stage collapsed due to an organizer's error, and contestants were running in every direction. It was pure chaos. Even then, my teammates and I couldn't stop cracking jokes at each other to calm our nerves. My first opponent had the strangest power I'd ever seen. He could inflate his body like a giant balloon. The sight was so ridiculous that the audience was howling with laughter throughout the entire match. Morong Yao, on the other hand, was a pro. She used her elemental control to crush her opponent easily. But when she won, she did this incredibly cute little victory pose. I couldn't help but laugh out loud. The team competition was a different story. We lacked coordination at first, leading to some pretty embarrassing mistakes. But we kept talking and adjusting, slowly finding our rhythm. Halfway through the event, a surprise reward round was announced. The prize was an artifact that could massively boost someone's power. We got fired up and gave it everything we had to snatch it. By the time we reached the finals, the pressure was suffocating. To lighten the mood, I started telling a bunch of dad jokes. It backfired. Everyone just got more nervous. In the final match, we faced the strongest opponents we had ever met. It was a peak showdown. The battlefield was blinding, filled with clashing skills and light. It was grueling, but in the final moments, I pushed through with sheer will. Thanks to our teamwork, we secured a narrow victory. We were the champions. We returned to the city as heroes, met with cheers and praise. Overnight, I became an idol in everyone's eyes. But as we celebrated, a new dark force was rising in the shadows. They were hunting other ability users, stealing their power to rule the world. I led the team to gather intel, but it wasn't easy. We kept running into eccentric informants and falling into hilarious intel traps. When it came to planning our strategy, the team split. Arguments broke out, and things got so heated we almost came to blows. To prepare for the fight, we tried to develop new ability-based weapons. The lab exploded multiple times because of stupid mistakes, leaving us all covered in soot and grime. The Dark Force eventually sent an envoy to provoke us. The guy was so arrogant and said such ridiculous things that we were all fuming. Then, disaster struck. Morong Yao was captured while on a mission. The enemy used her to threaten me. I was frantic and decided to save her no matter the cost. We threw together a rescue plan. It went through a dozen revisions and was full of wild, crazy ideas. I led a small group to sneak into the enemy camp. We used some pretty funny disguises and clever tricks to dodge their patrols. We searched everywhere for her, but we kept stumbling into traps, leading to a series of high-stakes, yet somehow funny, chase scenes. I finally found her and got her out. But as we were escaping, we tripped the alarm. Total chaos broke out. We fought our way through the pursuit, using our powers and the environment to create enough confusion to slip away. Back at the base, we took time to recover and reflect. I felt guilty about my impulsive choices, but the team just teased me to make me feel better. I proposed forming an ability alliance to fight back. Many people joined, but the process was a headache. Everyone was fighting over power and resources. Internal conflicts flared up as different factions tried to look out for themselves. I spent most of my time just playing mediator. During all this, I found a lead on a long-lost secret manual. We set off on a dangerous treasure hunt to find it. Other groups were after it too, leading to a massive, messy free-for-all. After a brutal fight, we finally grabbed the manual. The only problem? The text was so cryptic it made my head spin. We spent days trying to decode it, leading to some truly absurd misunderstandings and failed attempts to use the techniques. After endless days of trial and error, we finally cracked the code. The cryptic text from the manual started to make sense, and as I practiced the techniques, I felt my power surge to a whole new level. But there was no time to celebrate. Just as we were getting stronger, the dark forces launched a massive, coordinated attack. My city was transformed into a war zone overnight. Fire rained from the sky, and people fled in terror. I didn't hesitate. I rallied the Ability Alliance and led them into the heart of the chaos. The battlefield was a blinding blur of light and explosions as our powers clashed with the invaders. In the middle of the carnage, we looked out for each other. Even a small nod or a quick check-in between skirmishes kept our spirits from breaking. The enemy was clever, though. They used every dirty trick in the book to try and shatter our defensive lines. I had to stay sharp, using every bit of my intuition to sniff out their traps before they could spring them. The fighting became brutal. It was a desperate, bloody struggle for survival. I took a heavy hit and was seriously wounded, but I refused to go down. I couldn't. Then, at the absolute brink of death, something inside me snapped. I felt a massive surge of energy as I broke through to the transcendent realm. My power exploded. I tore through the enemy ranks, single-handedly turning the tide of the entire war. Seeing me break through gave the Alliance the boost they needed. We fought with renewed fury, and for the first time, I could see the light of victory. Finally, the leader of the dark forces stepped onto the field. It was the ultimate showdown. Our powers collided with enough force to shake the very foundations of the earth. It was the hardest fight of my life, but I pushed past my limits and struck him down. The war was over. We had won. The city was a wreck, but we didn't waste time mourning. I led the rebuilding efforts immediately. It was exhausting work, but seeing the city rise from the ashes gave us hope. To make sure this never happened again, I proposed a plan to bring ability education to the masses. I wanted everyone to have the tools to protect themselves. During a scouting trip later on, we stumbled upon a set of mysterious ruins. Legends said they held the ultimate secrets of our powers. We headed inside, but it was a death trap. Ancient mechanisms and strange, mutated creatures guarded every corridor. Every step was a gamble. Through the danger, my team grew tighter and stronger. Deep in the heart of the ruins, we faced a powerful guardian. It was a grueling fight, but by combining our strengths, we took it down and claimed the treasure it protected. Looking at what we'd found, I felt a new sense of confidence. We were ready for whatever the future held. Our victory over the dark forces made us famous. Soon after, we received an invitation from a mysterious ability academy. They claimed to have the best resources and teachers in the world. We were stoked and decided to check it out. But when we arrived, the entrance exam was a nightmare. The first test was a maze filled with traps. I charged in with total confidence and immediately fell into a giant pit. My teammates couldn't stop laughing at me. Morong Yao was much smarter about it. She used her elemental control to glide past the traps and take the lead. The others used their own tricks. Some flew, while others squeezed through tiny gaps. Eventually, we all made it through. Once we were officially students, things got even weirder. The classes were totally bizarre. In ability cooking, I tried to roast a chicken with my fire powers and turned it into a lump of charcoal. Meanwhile, Morong Yao made gourmet ice cream with her frost abilities and became the teacher's pet. Then there was ability dance, where my stiff movements made the instructor facepalm. Even ability painting was wild, with canvases that glowed or started moving on their own. It was ridiculous, but my control over my powers was actually improving. Then came the school tournament. My team signed up, of course. During the ability soccer match, I tried to blast the ball into the net, but ended up exploding it instead. Morong Yao had to save the day by using wind magic to pass the ball. The flying race was even more of a disaster. Some students flew into walls, others lost balance and plummeted. I managed to stay upright, but I was so slow I was basically in last place. Still, we worked together and managed to snag some decent rankings. One day, while exploring the campus, I found a hidden passage leading to a basement. It felt ancient and heavy with mystery. The room was packed with old artifacts and dusty books. When I picked up a yellowed manual, I triggered a trap. Arrows started flying everywhere. We scrambled to defend ourselves in the chaos and stumbled into a hidden inner chamber. Inside sat a powerful treasure. As we approached it, a guardian spirit manifested. The pressure it released was terrifying, pinning us to the floor. I grit my teeth and tried to communicate with it, while Murong Yao looked for a weakness. After a fierce struggle, we realized the spirit was just testing our courage. We passed, and the treasure was ours. But there was a problem. The treasure's power was too much for us to handle. It started leaking massive waves of energy that put the whole academy on high alert. The teachers rushed in and quarantined us to prevent the school from being leveled. Locked in a room, I focused everything I had on understanding the artifact. I finally found the key to stabilizing it. The teachers were impressed, and we were hailed as heroes again. But peace never lasts. Not long after, reports started coming in about ability-related crimes happening just outside the school walls. A series of strange, ability-related crimes started popping up all over the city. My team and I received a direct mission from the academy to assist the police in bringing these criminals down. As we dug into the investigation, a pattern emerged. These weren't random acts of violence. Everything was connected, pointing toward a much larger conspiracy hiding in the shadows. While we were tracking a lead, I walked straight into a trap. I found myself locked in a room rapidly filling with toxic gas. My lungs burned, and my vision blurred. Just as I thought it was over, Murong Yao arrived. Driven by desperation, she unleashed her elemental power and smashed the door to pieces, dragging me out just in time. After that close call, we didn't stop until we tracked the gang back to their hidden lair. A fierce battle broke out the moment we stormed the hideout. We didn't back down, but these guys were dangerous. They had bizarre abilities. Some could turn invisible, while others specialized in creating complex illusions. I got caught in one of those mental traps, surrounded by horrifying visions that felt all too real. Luckily, Murong Yao used our mental link to sense my distress. She pulled me back to reality just in time. We started gaining the upper hand, working together like a well-oiled machine. Then, the gang leader got desperate. He unleashed a powerful forbidden technique that brought the entire battle to a standstill. We were stuck, pinned down by the sheer weight of his dark energy. We didn't panic, though. We stayed calm and analyzed the flow of his power. I eventually spotted a flaw. The technique required a massive, constant energy supply. I rallied the team for a concentrated strike, cutting off his source entirely. The forbidden spell shattered. Without their trump card, the gang collapsed, and we swept them all up. Once again, we were the city's heroes. To show their gratitude, the police invited us to a high-end ability auction. The place was packed with rare artifacts and secret manuals. I set my sights on a necklace designed to boost mental strength, but the bidding was cutthroat. Murong Yao found an ancient spellbook that caught her eye. We had to use every bit of our wit and resources to outmaneuver the other bidders. But in the end, we walked away with exactly what we wanted. The celebration didn't last. Just as the auction was wrapping up, a group of mysterious raiders stormed the hall to steal the treasures. We jumped into action immediately. These weren't common thugs. They were armed with powerful ability-enhanced weapons that gave us a serious run for our money. During the chaos, I recognized the leader. He was a member of the dark forces who had escaped us before. Anger flared in my chest. I swore right then that he wouldn't get away twice. After a life-and-death struggle, we repelled the raiders and kept everyone safe. Shortly after the auction, I received a mysterious invitation. There was no name, just a time and an address. My team and I decided to check it out, leading us to an ancient, towering castle. As we approached, the heavy gates groaned open. A disembodied voice echoed through the air, welcoming us. We stepped inside, the atmosphere thick with mystery and old magic. The castle was one big gauntlet. First, We had to navigate a massive labyrinth filled with lethal traps. I relied on my instincts while the team covered my back, and we made it through. Next was a room with a mirror that projected our deepest fears. Morong Yao used her mental strength to keep us grounded, helping us push past the terror. Finally, we faced a guardian spirit with near-impenetrable defense. It was a grueling fight, but we found its weak point and struck hard, finally taking it down. Passing the tests revealed the castle's true secret. It was the former home of a legendary master, and it housed a secret manual capable of pushing our abilities to a whole new level. Getting it wasn't as simple as picking it up, though. We had to solve a series of complex puzzles. We combined our powers, some of us sensing hidden clues while others crunched the logic behind the mechanisms. We finally cracked the code and claimed the manual. As I touched the book, a golden light erupted, and the spirit of the creator appeared. He offered to pass his legacy directly to us. The process was agonizing. Our bodies were flooded with massive waves of raw energy. Morong Yao nearly lost consciousness from the strain, but I grabbed her hand and encouraged her to hold on. We made it through together, our power levels skyrocketing. We headed back to the academy feeling stronger than ever, but we returned to a nightmare. A group called the Shadow Alliance was trying to seize control of the school to steal its resources. We dove straight into the fight. These guys were tactical geniuses, using strange abilities that made the battle incredibly difficult. I had to think on my feet, mixing my old skills with the new techniques I'd just learned to turn the tide. The Shadow Alliance tried to outmaneuver us with flanking patterns and diversions. I decided to play them at their own game. I split our team into small strike cells to keep them guessing. Morong Yao kicked things off by conjuring a thick elemental mist to blind them, while the rest of us ambushed their rear lines. We were finally winning. They were retreating. But then, the Alliance played dirty. They revealed they had kidnapped several students and teachers, using them as human shields to force our surrender. I was stuck. I couldn't stop fighting, but I couldn't let innocent people die. Morong Yao came up with a risky plan. She volunteered to lead a rescue mission while I stayed behind to keep the Alliance busy. As she crept toward the hostages, she accidentally tripped a silent alarm. In an instant, the air exploded with gunfire and the blinding light of clashing powers. Morong Yao didn't flinch, pushing her elemental control to the absolute limit. Morong Yao didn't hesitate. She unleashed a massive blizzard, creating a whiteout that blinded the Shadow Alliance. It was the perfect cover. My teammates pushed forward through the snow and wind. Some took hits and fell, but they didn't stop. They dragged themselves toward the goal. Finally, they broke through and rescued the hostages. But the nightmare wasn't over. On our way out, we ran straight into the Shadow Alliance's main force. A life-or-death chase began. Morong Yao managed to lead the survivors back to me. Seeing everyone safe lit a fire in my soul. I was done running. I decided it was time for the final showdown to take back our academy. We met them head-on in the school square. I tapped into every ounce of energy I had, unleashing a burst of power so bright it lit up the entire sky. The Alliance leader countered with waves of pure darkness. The square turned into a war zone. Buildings crumbled, and dust choked the air. Then, I saw it, a tiny opening in his defense. I lunged. One strike was all it took. As their leader fell, the rest of the Alliance lost their will to fight and surrendered. The academy was finally quiet again. We held a massive victory feast. Everyone was laughing and celebrating, but I couldn't relax. I sat in the corner, thinking, we won today, but I knew this was just the beginning. There would be more threats, bigger and more dangerous than the Shadow Alliance. I realized my team needed to train harder. We had to get stronger. During the party, I stood up and gave a speech. I told them we couldn't forget why we started this. We had to protect the peace of the supernatural world. Morong Yao stood right by my side, her eyes full of support. While clearing the rubble a few days later, I found a diary belonging to the Shadow Alliance. It contained clues about a mysterious organization pulling the strings from the shadows. This wasn't just a school raid, it was a global conspiracy. Their goal was to control every person with powers on the planet. I knew we had to strike first. We started looking for allies and met a man named Aime. His family had been murdered by this secret group, and he'd been hunting them ever since. I felt for him. I invited him to join us, and he agreed. AI me brought fresh energy and vital intel to the team. We started tracking their movements, but the organization noticed. They sent assassins after us. The hunters became the hunted. We spent days dodging ambushes and fighting for our lives. Once, they cornered us in an abandoned factory. I used the terrain to my advantage, setting a series of traps. When the killers rushed in, I flipped the switch and wiped out half of them instantly. Murong Yao used her elemental powers to pin the rest down, giving the team an opening to finish the job. We escaped, but I knew running was a dead end. We had to cut the head off the snake. After weeks of tracking, we found their secret base hidden deep in the mountains. It was a fortress protected by high-tech defenses and deadly traps. We crept inside, moving like ghosts past the patrols. Deep in the heart of the base, we found their research labs. The data was horrifying. They were building a weapon to mind control every gifted individual on Earth. We grabbed the evidence and tried to slip out, but a sensor tripped. We were compromised. The base went into lockdown. Elite guards swarmed us from every corridor. I didn't flinch. I led the charge, breaking through the first wave. Murong Yao conjured a massive elemental storm that tore through their formations, scattering them like leaves. Even then, they kept coming. We were getting exhausted. Just as we were about to be overwhelmed, I spotted a weak point in the base's structural perimeter. I gathered everyone's strength for one final push, and we blasted our way out into the night. Once we were safe, we analyzed the stolen data. This organization was backed by a massive, wealthy network. Their mind control weapon was almost finished. I immediately reported everything to the Academy and other righteous factions. My intel shook them to the core. They agreed to form a grand alliance to stop the threat. At the secret summit, I was chosen as one of the core leaders because of my experience on the front lines. Murong Yao took charge of coordinating the different groups. We were finally a real army. We spent weeks preparing. We gathered specialized weapons, ran combat simulations, and sharpened our skills. I spent every waking hour refining our battle plan. Murong Yao used her mental abilities to keep everyone's spirits high, acting as the glue that held the alliance together. Finally, the day arrived. I led the army toward the organization's headquarters. They fought back with everything they had, but we didn't give an inch. When we reached the main gates, I gave the order to attack. The sky turned a dozen different colors as powers clashed. The roar of battle was deafening. I stayed at the front, trading blows with their top fighters. Every move I made was fueled by pure determination. Behind me, I could feel Murong Yao's presence, her power shielding us and keeping the team standing as we fought our way into the heart of the enemy. I did everything in my power to keep our combat strength from fading. My allies in the Grand Alliance were incredible, each showing off their unique abilities as we engaged in a life-or-death struggle. Smoke choked the air. Blood stained the ground. Both sides were paying a heavy price in lives, but we didn't flinch. I kept pushing my team forward, cutting a path toward the enemy's inner sanctum. After hours of brutal fighting, we finally shattered their defensive line. We breached the heart of the secret organization. Inside, we found a massive laboratory. It was chilling. They were in the final stages of developing the mind control weapon designed to enslave every supernatural being on Earth. I knew I couldn't let them finish. I rallied my teammates, and we charged into the lab, clashing with the elite guards in a final showdown. During the chaos, I spotted the weapon's core. Without a second thought, I lunged forward to destroy it. Just as my hand was about to strike the machine, the leader of the organization appeared. He unleashed a wave of terrifying power that stopped me dead in my tracks. His energy was overwhelming. I felt myself being crushed by the sheer weight of his aura. I was trapped, struggling to breathe under the pressure. But I didn't back down. My eyes burned with a renewed fighting spirit. Murong Yao was frantic. She manipulated the elements, hurling everything she had at the leader's flank to help me. It was useless. The leader's power formed an indestructible barrier that dissolved our attacks like they were nothing. She screamed for me not to give up, telling me we could win. I grit my teeth and channeled every drop of energy in my body, slamming into the leader's shield. The air around us turned white-hot and distorted from the collision of our powers. We were deadlocked until AI me spotted a tiny flaw in the leader's defense. She relayed the information to me instantly. I seized that split-second opening. I concentrated all my strength into a single point and broke through his barrier. The leader was caught off guard. My energy hit him square in the chest, sending him stumbling back. Seeing him vulnerable, my teammates unleashed their strongest attacks all at once. A kaleidoscope of lethal energy engulfed him. Under our combined might, the leader finally collapsed. I didn't waste a second. I rushed the weapon and put everything I had into one final blow. The machine shattered. With their weapon gone and their leader down, the remaining cult members lost hope and surrendered. The battle was over. Cheers erupted across the battlefield. We hugged each other, some of us crying, overwhelmed by a victory we had bled so much for. In the days that followed, we cleared the rubble and tended to the wounded. Peace slowly returned to the city. People looked at us with deep gratitude and respect. One evening, Murong Yao and I walked through the quiet streets, just enjoying the silence. She sighed, saying how hard it had all been. I took her hand and smiled. We had done it. I truly believed the future would be bright. I was wrong. Deep in a dark corner of the city, a new evil was rising. They were watching us, tracking our every move, waiting for us to drop our guard. A cold voice whispered in the shadows that my victory was only temporary. Soon, strange things started happening. People vanished without a trace. Research files on supernatural abilities were stolen from high-security vaults. I felt eerie energy fluctuations popping up in random districts. My team and I were forced back into action, hunting for the truth behind these incidents. Our investigation led us toward a new, secretive group. They were ghosts, leaving almost no trail behind. But I relied on my instincts and years of experience to find a breakthrough in the smallest details. To get real intel, I decided we had to go undercover into their nest. We slipped inside, moving through a maze of traps and high-level guards. I warned everyone to stay sharp. One mistake would be our last. We were discovered, and a fierce battle broke out. These enemies used strange, experimental weapons that gave us a lot of trouble. However, our teamwork was flawless. We fought with a desperate will and slowly gained the upper hand. During the fight, we stumbled upon their real goal. It was horrifying. They were creating a virus designed to infect and control the minds of every person with powers. Murong Yao was furious. We couldn't let this happen. I organized a strike to stop the experiment. It was a race against time. We managed to destroy their key equipment and data just before they finished. The cult members went into a frenzy, attacking us with suicidal rage. We fought our way out, retreating toward the exit while being hunted through the halls. We barely escaped with our lives. One of my teammates was gasping for air, saying how close that had been. We had stopped the production, but some virus samples were already missing. If those samples fell into the wrong hands, the world was finished. We began a desperate search, scouring every corner of the city and talking to every informant we knew. We hit wall after wall until we finally found a mysterious lead. This man supposedly knew where the samples were hidden. When we confronted him, he gave us a cold ultimatum. He wouldn't tell us a thing unless we completed a task for him first. It was a dangerous, high-stakes mission. I looked at my team, then at the man. We didn't have a choice. I agreed to his terms. We set out to finish his task, facing powerful enemies and impossible environments, knowing we couldn't afford to fail. It took everything we had, but we finally completed the task. The informant kept his word and gave us the location of the virus samples. I led the team to the site, but my heart sank when I saw the perimeter. The place was a fortress. It was crawling with guards and high-tech security. We needed a plan, and it had to be perfect. Murong Yao suggested a classic distraction, a feint to draw the guards away while the rest of us slipped inside. We all agreed. It was our best shot. The execution was chaotic. Unexpected alarms went off, and patrols changed routes at the worst moments. We had to adapt on the fly, moving through the shadows and taking out guards silently. Despite the hiccups, my team stayed sharp. We reached the vault and secured the virus samples. We actually did it, someone whispered. A wave of relief washed over us, and a small cheer broke out. We had the samples. We didn't waste a second. I led the team to a secure, isolated location to begin the destruction process. One mistake here could infect the entire city. We handled the vials with trembling hands, moving with extreme caution. Finally, the last sample was neutralized. The crisis was over. The world was safe, at least for now. Just as the dust settled, a new notification arrived. It was an invitation to the Supernatural Grand Prix. This was a global event where the strongest ability users on Earth gathered to test their limits. It was a massive stage for exchange and raw power. I looked at my team. "This is a good chance to get stronger," I said. "Let's do it." Preparation was intense. We analyzed the tournament rules and researched potential opponents. I pushed myself and my teammates to the brink, developing new tactics and refining our coordination. We needed an edge if we wanted to win. We weren't just going there to participate, we were going there to dominate. The day finally arrived. We traveled to the host city, and the energy in the air was electric. Thousands of powerful ability users filled the streets, all radiating confidence and fighting spirit. I felt the pressure tightening in my chest, but more than that, I felt a surge of excitement. We were ready. The preliminary rounds started fast. We faced a variety of opponents, each with strange and terrifying powers. Every match was a brutal struggle, a showcase of light and force. I stayed calm, relying on my experience to read my opponent's movements. One by one, we climbed the ranks. I fought my way through the bracket and secured a spot in the next round. The semifinals were a different beast entirely. The competition was fiercer, and the opponents were elite. Every victory felt like it cost us a piece of ourselves. The matches were grueling, but we leaned on each other. We provided the support and encouragement needed to keep going. We refused to back down. Against all odds, we made it to the finals. The night before the big match, the tension was thick enough to cut. We spent hours studying our final opponents, trying to find a crack in their defense. Murong Yao prepared a massive feast for us, hoping to ease our nerves. It helped, but we all knew what was coming. The final day arrived. The stadium was packed to the rafters, the roar of the crowd shaking the very ground. We walked out onto the stage to face the strongest team in the tournament. The match began, and the air exploded with energy. It was a breathtaking clash of powers that lit up the entire arena. I found myself locked in a stalemate with their leader. Our strengths were perfectly matched. The battle reached a fever pitch, and the audience watched in stunned silence. My body was screaming in pain, but I pushed through. In the heat of the moment, I focused. I used every ounce of my will to control my energy with surgical precision. I saw it, a tiny opening in his stance. I lunged. One strike was all it took. I won. We were the champions. We stood on the podium as the crowd chanted our names. Our reputation spread through the supernatural world like wildfire. We were heroes now. On the stage, I looked at the cameras, my voice thick with emotion. "This honor belongs to my team," I said, "and we will keep fighting for justice." After the glory of the tournament, we returned home. A rare peace settled over our lives. But I didn't let my guard down. I kept training, pushing my abilities even further. "The peace is nice," I told the team, "but we have to be ready for the next crisis. It's always coming." I was right. One morning, a mysterious letter arrived. It spoke of an ancient legend buried deep within the history of the supernatural world. The legend claimed there was a hidden power that could elevate an ability user to a godlike level. My curiosity was piqued. I decided to investigate. My team and I started hunting for clues. We scoured ancient libraries, explored crumbling ruins, and interviewed old hermits who dealt in myths. Slowly, the pieces began to fit together. The legend was real, and the power was waiting. The trail led us to a forbidden zone. It was a place of nightmare, filled with unknown lethality and powerful guardians. We didn't hesitate. We pushed through traps and fought off monsters that shouldn't exist. We were driven by the need to find that power before anyone else did. Finally, we reached the heart of the ruins. To claim the power, we had to endure a series of agonizing trials. They tested our spirits, our bodies, and our loyalty to each other. I held on to my convictions, drawing strength from my friends. With a final surge of will, I awakened the ancient power. Awakening it was one thing, controlling it was another. The energy was massive and incredibly unstable. It felt like trying to hold a star in my bare hands. We spent weeks in isolation, struggling to tame the force. There were setbacks and moments where I thought the power would consume me, but I never gave up. As we were learning to harness this new strength, a shadow loomed over us. A mysterious organization had been tracking our progress. They wanted the power for themselves. Get ready, I told the team, sensing them approaching. We can't let them take this. The enemy didn't wait. They launched a full-scale assault using elite mercenaries and experimental weaponry. We stood our ground, and the battle turned the landscape into a wasteland. Light and steel clashed as we fought to protect what we had found. I unleashed the new power, and the impact was devastating. I tore through their ranks, but they kept coming. They adjusted their tactics, throwing everything they had at our defensive line. The battle turned into a bloody stalemate. In the heat of the fight, our defenses finally buckled. A group of enemies broke through, and we were suddenly surrounded. It looked like the end. Hold the line, I screamed, my voice hoarse. We don't lose today. Just as we were about to be overwhelmed, AI Mi's eyes widened. She had been analyzing the enemy's formation. She spotted a fatal weakness in their command structure. I saw my chance. I saw the opening and took it. I led my team in a fierce counterattack, catching the enemy completely off guard. The momentum shifted. We fought through the exhaustion, pushing back their ranks until the last of them retreated. We had won. Peace returned to the city. People flooded the streets, cheering and weeping with relief. It was a hard-earned victory, one that left us all scarred but standing. Morong Yao looked at the celebrating crowds and sighed. She told me we had to cherish this peace because of how much it cost us. For a while, things were quiet. We spent our days helping rebuild the city, using our powers to clear rubble and restore infrastructure. During those calm months, the bond between Morong Yao and me grew deeper. We weren't just soldiers anymore. But peace never lasts. A frantic message arrived from the Supernatural Academy. A strange virus had broken out, causing students and teachers to lose control of their powers. It was chaos. We dropped everything and rushed to the academy to investigate. The trail led us to a dark discovery. The source of the virus was a sealed, long-forgotten laboratory. Rumor had it that dangerous experiments were conducted there years ago. If we wanted to save the academy, we had to go inside. The lab was a nightmare of rusted equipment and mutated creatures prowling the halls. We moved cautiously, fighting off sudden attacks while searching for clues. Deep in the bowels of the facility, I found an old, dusty experimental log. The log held the cure, but it wasn't simple. We needed rare materials and had to synthesize the antidote within a strict time frame. We split up immediately. The search was brutal. We fought powerful guardians and navigated deadly natural traps, but my team didn't buckle. We gathered everything we needed just as the clock was running out. Back at the lab, the pressure was on. Making the antidote required precise energy control. One slip and the whole batch would be ruined. Morong Yao stepped up, using her incredible elemental mastery to stabilize the process. It worked. We rushed back and distributed the medicine to the infected students and teachers. One by one, their powers stabilized. The crisis was over, and once again, we were the heroes of the academy. I barely had time to breathe before a mysterious invitation arrived. It was addressed only to me, inviting me to a remote island. The letter claimed the island held the ultimate secret of my powers. I decided to go alone. I needed to know the truth. The island was heavy with ancient energy. Every step I took felt like walking through a thick fog of supernatural power. Deep in the jungle, I found an ancient ruin. It felt connected to me, as if it had been waiting for my arrival. But the ruin had guardians. To get the information I sought, I had to pass a series of lethal trials. The first was a powerful spirit guardian that tested my raw strength. It was a grueling fight, but I spotted a flaw in its movements and struck hard, shattering its defense. I passed every test. Finally, the ruins revealed their secrets. My powers awakened further, reaching a level I never thought possible. But the information came with a price. I learned a shocking truth about the origin of supernatural beings, a truth that changed everything I knew about our world. I returned to the city with this heavy burden. I had a choice: keep the secret to protect people, or tell the truth. I looked at my team and realized I couldn't do this alone. I told them everything. We took on a new mission together, knowing the path ahead would be darker than ever. Soon, a wave of supernatural crimes hit the city. Criminals were using their powers to rob and kidnap, spreading fear everywhere. I was furious. These thugs were mocking the peace we bled for. We hit the streets, hunting for any scrap of evidence. The investigation was a grind. We stood in a trashed jewelry store, surrounded by broken glass. I could feel the lingering energy in the air. The culprits were fast and strong. We interviewed witnesses, but everyone was too traumatized to give us clear answers. All they saw were shadows moving at impossible speeds. Just as the trail was going cold, Aimi found something. She spotted strange footprints in a back alley, burned into the pavement by raw energy. We followed them to an abandoned factory on the edge of town. The air inside smelled like chemicals and rot. I signaled for silence, and we moved in, weapons ready. But the building was empty. All that remained were scattered tracks and the lingering scent of a trap. I scanned the room, my eyes landing on strange equipment that looked like it belonged in a supernatural testing lab. Was this their hideout? If so, it was dead quiet. Morong Yao looked around, her brow furrowed in confusion. She asked why no one was there. I thought about it for a moment. Maybe they had sensed us coming and moved their operation, but at least we had a lead. They were conducting dangerous experiments on supernatural abilities. That was likely the motive behind their crimes. Even with these clues, the truth remained buried under a thick fog. We were facing a massive challenge. The breakthrough came when I least expected it. I was sitting in a quiet cafe, trying to clear my head, when I overheard two strangers talking at a nearby table. They mentioned the recent supernatural crimes and dropped a few suspicious details. I didn't make a scene. I just leaned back, pretending to read my newspaper while my ears stayed sharp. They were talking about a group looking for something important, an ancient manual of supernatural techniques. One of them asked if it could really make them stronger. My heart skipped a beat. This was the key. I followed them discreetly when they left. They led me to a remote corner of the city and vanished into a rundown building. I signaled my team, and we crept inside. We found a hidden basement packed with files, experimental data, and strange gear. I knew right then we had found the right place. We tore through the documents and realized these criminals were trying to break the seal on an ancient power to gain ultimate strength. Their robberies were just a way to fund the resources they needed for the ritual. Morong Yao gripped her weapon, swearing we couldn't let them succeed. Then, I found it, a list. It contained the names of every member and their likely hideouts. This was our chance. We had to move fast. Using that list, we started hunting them down one by one, inching closer to the truth. The trail led us to an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. From the outside, it looked silent and dead. But my senses were screaming. I could feel powerful energy fluctuations vibrating through the air. I told the team to stay sharp because a trap was waiting for us. We stepped inside, weapons ready. A sharp, piercing laugh echoed through the rafters. A figure stepped out of the shadows, the leader of the syndicate. He looked at me with a twisted grin and said he'd been waiting for us. I glared back, telling him their crimes ended today. He just laughed and waved a hand. Suddenly, his men swarmed out from every corner, unleashing their powers. The warehouse lit up with flashes of energy and the sound of mid-air collisions. I didn't hesitate. I threw myself into a duel with the leader, while Morong Yao used her elemental powers to provide cover. Me and the others fought like demons. As we clashed, I noticed something wrong. Their powers were too strong. They had been enhanced by some kind of taboo method. I shouted that justice would win regardless of their tricks. The fight was brutal, but we slowly started to gain the upper hand. They were stubborn, looking for any gap to strike back, but I finally saw a flaw in the leader's defense. I gathered every ounce of my strength and delivered a crushing blow. The hit shattered his defense and sent him crashing to the floor. Seeing their leader fall, the rest of the thugs lost their nerve and started to run. I yelled for the team not to let them get away. We chased them down, subduing them one by one. But just as victory felt certain, the entire warehouse erupted. A massive explosion tore through the building, filling the air with fire and choking black smoke. Morong Yao screamed for everyone to be careful. I threw up a protective energy shield, wrapping it around my team, but the blast was too much. I could see cracks forming in the barrier. Aimi shouted that we had to get out now. We stumbled through the thick smoke, searching for an exit as the fire grew and falling crates blocked our path. Murong Yao spotted a small gap that hadn't been swallowed by the flames yet. We scrambled toward it, dodging burning debris that rained down from the ceiling. We made it out just in time, lungs burning. One of my teammates collapsed, gasping for air, but we didn't have a second to breathe. A new circle of criminals was already waiting for us outside. They had a backup plan. I tightened my grip on my weapon and told the team to get ready. They were closing in, and we were backed into a corner. I looked them in the eye and told them that even if we died, we wouldn't let them win. My words gave them pause, but then they charged, more desperate than before. The pressure was immense. Murong Yao's face went pale as her elemental energy began to run dry. She whispered that she couldn't hold on much longer. I told her to stay with me, promising we'd find a way. That's when me spotted a weak point in their formation. I saw it too. I ordered everyone to focus their power on that single spot. I led the charge, my energy blast creating a moment of pure chaos in their lines. We sprinted for the gap. In the middle of the breakout, one of our guys took a hit and went down. He told us to leave him, but I refused. We don't leave anyone behind. We hauled him up and broke through the perimeter, but the enemy was right on our heels. We ran until we hit the edge of a wide, rushing river. There was no bridge and no time to think. Murong Yao looked at the water, panicked, saying we were trapped. I looked at the rapids and grit my teeth. I told them we were swimming. We dived into the freezing water, fighting the current with everything we had left. We dragged ourselves onto the opposite bank, exhausted and shivering, while the criminals stood on the other side, cursing us from the shore. We had escaped, but we were spent. It was time to regroup and find the final piece of the puzzle. Lin D and the rest of the team found a safe spot to lay low. We were all a mess, covered in bruises and nursing wounds of various sizes. Everyone looked exhausted, but when I looked into their eyes, the fire was still there. Me leaned against a wall and let out a long breath, saying that as terrifying as that was, at least we were still breathing. I nodded. She was right. We had to recover our strength fast because the hunt wasn't over yet. Murong Yao started using her elemental energy to treat our injuries, the soft glow of her power soothing the sharpest pains. While she worked, I tried to clear my head and map out our next move. Suddenly, my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. It contained a specific address and fresh intel on the supernatural criminals we were chasing. One of my teammates looked over my shoulder and asked if it was a trap. I thought about it for a second. It probably was, but it was the only lead we had. I told them we were going anyway. After a quick rest, we headed out to the address. It led us to an abandoned factory on the edge of the city, a desolate place where the wind howled through broken windows. As we stepped inside, the air felt heavy and wrong. I told everyone to stay sharp. We moved deeper into the gloom, our footsteps echoing against the rusted metal. Then, I heard it, a low, guttural growl that vibrated in my chest. Murong Yao gripped her weapon, asking what that sound was. I signaled for silence and followed the noise. In a massive workshop, we found it. A gargantuan creature was chained to the floor, radiating waves of intense supernatural energy. Me gasped, wondering if this was their secret weapon. I frowned, realizing the situation was getting darker by the second. That's when a shadow moved. A figure stepped out from the darkness and called my name. I squinted, and my heart sank. It was a face I knew, a former classmate from the Supernatural Academy. I felt a surge of anger and asked him why he was doing this. He just gave me a cold, hollow laugh. He told me the world wasn't fair and that only those with power could control their own fate. I looked at him, feeling a mix of disappointment and rage. A new battle was about to begin. I stood there, my mind racing with memories of our time at the academy. I tried to talk him down, to tell him it wasn't too late to turn back, but he wouldn't listen. He called me naive. He asked if I really thought my sense of justice could change the world. Then he offered me a spot by his side to claim ultimate power. I shook my head. I told him I'd never join them and that today was the end of the line for his crew. But as I raised my hand to fight, I hesitated. He was an old friend. Did I really have the heart to take him down? Murong Yao saw the doubt in my eyes. She told me not to be soft, reminding me that he wasn't the person we used to know. I took a deep breath and centered myself. She was right. The fight exploded instantly. He unleashed the chained beast, commanding it to tear us apart. We fought back with everything we had, the factory lighting up with flashes of elemental power. The creature was a nightmare. Its hide was thick, and its strikes were devastating. We couldn't find a way through its defenses. My old friend kept mocking me from the sidelines, calling my hesitation a weakness. His insults fueled my anger. I stopped holding back and threw a full power blast at the beast, but it seemed to absorb the energy. We were getting nowhere. AI shouted that we needed to find a weak point. I forced myself to calm down and watch. I tracked its movements and the flow of its energy until I saw it. A flicker of vulnerability at the base of its head. I yelled for everyone to focus their fire right there. We combined our powers into one massive, blinding strike. With a deafening roar, the creature collapsed. The backlash hit my former friend hard, sending him crashing to the floor. I walked over to him. He looked broken and miserable, but I felt no joy in it. I asked him again why he chose this path. He just smiled bitterly, saying he craved the power to change an unfair world. I stayed silent. I knew the world had its problems, but becoming a monster wasn't the answer. We pushed deeper into the factory and found a hidden room stuffed with files and lab records. The truth was worse than we imagined. This group had been running experiments to fuse different supernatural abilities into one unstoppable force. They had been stealing resources and hurting innocent people just to play God. Morong Yao looked at the data and said they were insane. I told her we had to end it now. Suddenly, alarms blared. A group of men in black suits swarmed the room, surrounding us. Their leader stepped forward, telling us we were fools if we thought we could stop them. I realized this was their final stand. I told the team to get ready. This was the endgame. The factory turned into a war zone. I moved like lightning through the crowd, my powers at their peak. Morong Yao summoned a literal storm, her winds tossing enemies aside like dolls. Me, and the others fought like lions. Eventually, I locked eyes with the leader. His energy was dark and suffocating. He told me today was the day I died. I told him to try me. We clashed in a blur of power. For a moment, it felt like the rest of the world vanished. It was just him and me. I pushed through the exhaustion, waiting for that one opening. When I saw it, I didn't hesitate. I struck with everything I had left and watched him fall. With their leader down, the rest of the men lost their will to fight and surrendered. It was over. We had stopped the conspiracy and saved the city. In the days that followed, the city began to heal. We were hailed as heroes, and the mayor even gave us medals of honor. He called us the pride of the city, the embodiment of justice. As I held that medal, I knew this was just part of the job. As long as evil existed, I wouldn't stop fighting. The academy stepped up its security and changed its rules to make sure nothing like this ever happened again. My team and I decided to stay on as instructors. We wanted to train the next generation of supernatural users properly. We had to make sure they understood that power isn't a tool for crime. It's a responsibility to protect those who can't protect themselves. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. My team and I were ready for more challenges and adventures. We believed that as long as we stayed united, justice would eventually triumph over evil. The city's future looked bright, and I hoped our story would become a legend in the supernatural world. I wanted to inspire generations of power users to fight for peace. But peace is often an illusion. After we stopped the major crime wave, the city enjoyed a moment of calm. People went back to their lives, and the streets were full of laughter again. Yet, sitting in the academy library with an ancient text in my hands, I couldn't shake a bad feeling. Morong Yao walked over and sat across from me. She saw the look on my face. She asked if I was still worried about new trouble. I rubbed my temples and sighed. I told her it felt too smooth, like the eerie silence before a massive storm. Right then, Aimi ran in, out of breath. She told us they had detected strange energy fluctuations on the edge of the city. I stood up immediately. It was time to move. We reached an abandoned factory district. The air felt heavy and wrong. I led the way into a derelict workshop filled with rusted machinery. I warned everyone to stay sharp. Suddenly, a dark shadow flickered behind us. Morong Yao spun around and unleashed her elemental power, but the shadow vanished instantly. She was stunned by its speed. I frowned, scanning the room. We were dealing with a very tricky opponent. We searched the area, but found nothing. Just as we were about to leave, a massive wave of energy hit us. The entire factory began to shake violently. I realized it was a trap. The ground cracked open, and giant mechanical arms erupted from the earth, swinging at us with lethal force. We fought back with everything we had, but the machines were incredibly strong. We were getting pinned down. I told the team we had to find the source. After a brutal struggle, we located a hidden underground control center. A mysterious figure sat there, hands flying across a console. I shouted at him to stop. The figure turned around, revealing a twisted, hideous face. He sneered, telling me we wouldn't escape. I lunged forward. With the team's help, we engaged him in a fierce battle. We managed to take him down and shut off the machinery. Me leaned against a wall, gasping for air, relieved it was over. But I wasn't. I told her this was just the beginning. My gut told me a much bigger crisis was lurking. Back at the academy, we dug into the investigation. We found a unique symbol on the attacker's body. It led us to a secret organization we had never heard of before. Murong Yao was frustrated that they had stayed hidden for so long. I stared at the files piled on the conference table. They were conducting dangerous research in the shadows. Me pointed out that they seemed to be kidnapping powerful supernatural users for a massive conspiracy. I looked out the window, my jaw set. Whatever they wanted, I wasn't going to let them have it. We needed more intel. Murong Yao volunteered to lead a small team to scout for info. They headed to an underground market where all sorts of people gathered. After days of blending in and talking to informants, she came back with a lead. The organization had a secret base in the outskirts of the city. I gathered the team and we headed out. The base was a fortress, crawling with guards and supernatural traps. I decided to split us into groups to sneak in from different angles. My group dodged the patrols and slipped inside. The interior was packed with high-tech lab equipment. We moved cautiously, but then a piercing alarm filled the halls. The base went into lockdown. We were compromised. Guards flooded the corridors from every direction. These weren't normal thugs. They were powerful supernatural users with murder in their eyes. I ordered everyone to bunch up. We formed a tight defensive circle. Murong Yao threw up a wall of fire to hold them back. Me shouted that we needed an exit. I spotted a path leading toward a basement and signaled the team to follow. We fought a retreating battle, dodging a rain of attacks. People were getting hurt, but I kept pushing them forward. The basement was worse. It smelled of sharp chemicals, and the walls were lined with horrifying experimental specimens. One of my teammates started shaking. I didn't say a word. My eyes were locked on a massive experimental chamber. Inside, a faint figure was visible through the glass. It looked like a nightmare in progress. Suddenly, a group of men in black uniforms blocked our path. A woman with a cold, heartless face stepped forward and looked me in the eye. My name left her lips like a curse. "None of you are leaving this place alive," the woman said. Her voice was ice. I let out a cold snort. "Then try and stop us." The fight exploded instantly. I unleashed my full power, clashing with the woman in a blur of energy. We were locked in a stalemate. Nearby, Murong Yao and the rest of the team were fighting for their lives against a wave of enemies. As we traded blows, I realized something was wrong. Her power was bizarre. She wasn't just blocking my attacks, she was absorbing them and turning that energy back against me. "Watch out," I yelled to the team. "There's something wrong with her ability." It was a brutal struggle, but I kept my eyes peeled for a pattern. Finally, I spotted a flicker in her defense, a tiny opening. I lunged, striking the weakness and taking her down in one shot. We had won, but the cost was high. Our stamina was drained, and our energy reserves were running dangerously low. "Don't stop," I panted, waving them forward. "We have to keep moving." We pushed deeper into the basement, following a narrow corridor until we stumbled upon a hidden room. It was filled with stacks of documents and humming servers. This was it, the core secrets of the organization. I grabbed a file and scanned the pages. My blood ran cold. "This is bad," I said, my voice trembling. "They aren't just experimenting. They're planning to wipe out the entire city." Time was running out. We knew we had to get out of that base and warn the world, but we were surrounded. "Lin D, what do we do?" one of my teammates asked. I could see the fear in his eyes. I took a deep breath and steadied my gaze. We can't just sit here and wait to die. We have to fight our way out. Morong Yao looked at the exhausted team. Our energy is almost gone. A head-on charge might be a suicide mission. I scanned the room, and my eyes landed on the rows of experimental equipment. I have an idea. We use their own tech to create a distraction. We cause enough chaos to slip through the cracks. The team nodded. We moved fast, rigging the instruments to overload. Seconds later, a piercing alarm shrieked through the halls. Thick smoke filled the air, and lights began to flicker violently. The guards panicked, rushing toward the lab to see what happened. Now, I shouted. We sprinted toward the exit. It was a gauntlet. Guards blocked every turn, but we fought with everything we had left. Aimi took a heavy hit and was bleeding badly, but she gritted her teeth and kept running. Don't give up, I warned. We're almost there. The exit was in sight, but a powerful supernatural user stood in our way, blocking the door. You're not going anywhere, he growled. I didn't hesitate. I charged him head-on. It was a desperate, breathtaking duel, but my will was stronger. I pushed my body past its limits and forced him back. Go. Get out of here, I yelled. Morong Yao seized the chance and led the team out into the open air. I used the last spark of my strength to floor the guard one last time before diving after them. We ran into the forest, the sounds of pursuit echoing behind us. I looked back at the dark facility, making a silent vow. I would stop this conspiracy, no matter what. After a long, grueling trek, we finally lost them. We collapsed in a clearing, gasping for air. What's the move? Someone asked. Back to the academy, I said, my lungs burning. We report what we found and prepare for war. Back at the Supernatural Academy, the atmosphere was suffocating. Once we delivered the news to the high-ranking officials, the entire school went into lockdown. Everyone knew a massive crisis was looming. We shifted into emergency mode. Every student and master was called to arms for high-intensity training. As a core member, I was put in charge of the battle strategy. We need to know their exact strength and their timeline, I told the council. We can't fight a ghost. Morong Yao added, we need more intel. We have to find their other bases and see who else is helping them. We realized the academy couldn't do this alone. We needed allies. Morong Yao and I began reaching out to other righteous organizations. Our first meeting was with a group called the Light Guardians. Their leader was skeptical. How can we trust that you can handle this? He asked, crossing his arms. I stood up, my voice firm. We have the intel, and we have the courage to see this through. But we also know that if we don't stand together, we all fall. It worked. The Light Guardians joined us, and soon, a massive alliance began to form. We spent our days and nights training, refining our techniques, and testing new combat methods. I kept pushing the team. We do this for the city, for the people who can't fight for themselves. But the organization wasn't waiting. They were accelerating their plans. The air over the city grew heavy and oppressive. I stood on the academy's watchtower with Morong Yao, looking out at the skyline. I have a bad feeling, Morong Yao whispered. This enemy is stronger than anything we've faced. I put a hand on his shoulder. We can't back down. There are too many lives at stake. Down in the camp, the sound of magic and training filled the air. Aimi ran up to us, clutching a new report. Lin D, they've set up powerful supernatural barriers at key points in the city. Our movement will be restricted. I frowned. Get a scout team together. Find the weak points in those barriers. We need a way through before the first shot is fired. Far away, in a dark, secret chamber, the leader of the organization looked at his followers. This is our moment, he said. Make this city our trophy. The citizens felt the storm coming. Doors were locked. Streets were empty. In the academy labs, scientists worked around the clock on a new type of supernatural weapon. Faster, the lead scientist shouted. We're out of time. I stood in the meeting room, surrounded by the leaders of the Grand Alliance. We were making our final strategic moves. Maps covered the table, marked with high-priority targets and combat zones. Every face in the room was grim, etched with a heavy resolve. I knew this would be the hardest fight of our lives, but I looked them in the eyes and spoke with everything I had. This will be a tough battle, I said. But we will win. As night fell, the air grew cold. The city held its breath, waiting for a dawn that felt like it might never come. The horn for the final battle sounded just as the first light of morning touched the skyline. The mysterious organization didn't wait. They hit us like a hurricane. Supernatural light exploded in every corner of the city. The sound of blasts was deafening. I led the Alliance warriors straight into the chaos. We sprinted through narrow alleys and main streets, clashing with enemy agents in a desperate struggle. Morong Yao was a force of nature. She manipulated the elements, turning fire, frost, and lightning into lethal blades. She pushed the enemy back step by step. "Keep going," she shouted. "Don't let them break through." AI was our eyes. Using her sensory abilities, she fed us constant intel. "Enemy reinforcements on the left. Watch out," she yelled over the noise. I unleashed my own power, every strike carrying enough force to level a building. But the resistance was stubborn. It felt like the enemy had an endless supply of soldiers and hidden support. Then, word reached me from the other side of the city. A high-level operative was trying to sabotage the main power facility. If they succeeded, the city would fall into total darkness. I grabbed a team of elites and raced there. "We have to hold that facility," I told them. We arrived just as the operative was about to deliver the final blow. I didn't hesitate. I lunged forward, and we locked into a breathtaking duel. Our powers collided, the shockwaves collapsing nearby structures. After a brutal exchange, I spotted a tiny opening in his defense. I struck hard and took him down. But the war was far from over. Smoke rose from every district. Our casualties were mounting. "We can't give up," I told my team, trying to keep their spirits alive. For the future of this city. Time blurred as the fighting reached a stalemate. But something felt off. In the central square, the battle hit a fever pitch. We were repelling wave after wave of attacks, but Morong Yao suddenly pulled back, her eyes wide. "Lindy, something is wrong," she said. "They're just stalling us." My heart tightened. Were we falling for a trap? Just then, AI's voice crackled with panic. "Lindy, they're activating a massive supernatural device. It's enough to wipe out the entire city." My face went pale. "Move. We have to stop them." We sprinted toward the device, a massive tower-like structure. The enemy sent everything they had to slow us down. High-level guards blocked every path, trying to bleed away our precious seconds. "We have to get there before it starts," I warned. We finally reached the base of the tower. At the very top stood the leader of the organization. He looked down at us with a smug, twisted grin. "You're too late, Lindy," he laughed. "Once this starts, the city turns to ash." I glared up at him, my blood boiling. "You're insane. You'll pay for this." We stormed the tower, fighting a desperate battle against his personal guard. I realized the device needed the leader's own energy as a core drive. I had to take a risk. "Cover me," I shouted. My teammates threw themselves into the line of fire, creating a path. I lunged at the leader, pouring every ounce of my strength into one final strike. The leader took the hit, coughing blood. The device sputtered, the activation sequence stalling. But then, he flashed a gruesome smile. "Even if I die, the sequence is set." He slammed his hand onto a hidden button. The device roared back to life. A countdown began to echo through the air. Every tick felt like a funeral bell. I was frantic. We had to find a way to kill the power. "Spread out. Find a weakness," I yelled. Morong Yao used her elemental senses to trace the energy flow. "I found something," she called out. I ran to her side. She pointed to a complex node pulsing with light. "If we break this, it might stop." I gathered my power and struck the node, but a massive energy shield flared up. The recoil sent me flying back. I hit the ground hard, gasping for air. My vision blurred, but I didn't back down. Morong Yao ran to help me up. "Lindy, are you okay?" I grit my teeth. "I'm fine. We have to break that shield." Me ran over, clutching a handful of documents she'd scavenged. I found the schematics. There might be a way to bypass it. We huddled together, scanning the pages as the countdown ticked lower. The sweat was stinging my eyes. "I'll try an elemental fusion," Morong Yao said. She combined fire, ice, and lightning into a single beam and fired. The shield flickered, but it didn't break. "It's not enough," I muttered. Then, Morong Yao looked at me. "Lindy, remember the combined technique from the academy? If we merge our powers, we might have the strength. My eyes lit up. Do it. Everyone, focus on us. The team gathered around, pouring their energy into Morong Yao and me. The air began to vibrate with raw power. We held hands, guiding the massive surge of combined energy toward the shield. Now, I screamed. With a deafening crack, the shield shattered. The core of the device sat exposed before us. The final confrontation was here. The leader of the shadowy organization went mad. He lunged toward the core, desperate to restart the device and finish his plan. I didn't hesitate. I threw myself into his path, meeting him head-on in a final, desperate struggle. While I fought for my life, Morong Yao led the rest of the team. They poured everything they had into attacking the device, trying to jam the gears and kill the power. My powers clashed with the leader's in a violent explosion of energy. His aura was cold, dark, and oily. It felt like it was eating away at my defenses, bit by bit. Lindy, watch out. Morong Yao screamed. She was still focused on the device, but kept glancing back at me, her face pale with worry. I grit my teeth and held my ground. I wasn't going to let him win. Not after everything we'd sacrificed. As the battle raged, I started to see the cracks in his technique. He was sloppy, driven by desperation. I spotted an opening and lunged, delivering a fatal blow with every ounce of strength I had left. The leader let out a horrific scream and collapsed to the floor. At that exact moment, Morong Yao managed to crush the internal components of the machine. The countdown froze. It stopped. We did it, the team cheered. Relief washed over me, but it was short-lived. Without warning, the device groaned and exploded. A massive shockwave ripped through the room, throwing us all like ragdolls. Smoke and dust choked the air. I scrambled to my feet, my ears ringing, panic rising in my chest. Morong Yao, where are you? I screamed into the haze. Lindy, I'm here. A weak voice called out from the rubble. I found her buried under some debris. She looked terrible, her clothes torn and blood staining her skin. I knelt beside her, my heart aching. How bad is it? She forced a tiny, painful smile. I'm okay. As long as the device is gone, it was worth it. I lifted her into my arms, holding her tight. Don't be scared. I'm getting you out of here. With the help of the others, we retreated from the ruins. The city was a nightmare. Smoke hung over the wreckage of buildings, and the air smelled of fire and grief. So many people were gone. Even though we won, the cost was staggering. Later, we were taken to the medical wing of the Supernatural Academy. My injuries were mostly surface level, but Morong Yao was in bad shape. Between the energy drain and the blast, she had slipped into a coma. Morong Yao, you have to wake up, I whispered. I sat by her bed for days, gripping her hand, refusing to leave her side. Aimi walked in and saw me looking like a ghost. Lindy, you need to rest. She's going to be okay. I just shook my head. I'm staying until she opens her eyes. Outside, the city began the slow process of rebuilding. Students and teachers from the academy used their powers to clear debris and heal the wounded. In a temporary shelter nearby, I heard a little girl crying for her home. A teacher comforted her, promising that we would rebuild together. I felt a crushing weight of guilt. It's my fault, I thought. If I had been stronger, maybe they wouldn't have suffered so much. Then, I felt a twitch. Morong Yao's fingers moved in mine. Her eyes fluttered open slowly. Lindy. I nearly broke down right there. You're finally awake. She gave me a weak, tired smile. I knew you'd be here. Peace lasted for a while as Morong Yao recovered and the city returned to a sense of normalcy. But in our world, peace is a fragile thing. One day, while we were out patrolling the streets, a strange vibration hit me. It was a familiar energy, but twisted. Morong Yao frowned, her senses sharp. I looked toward the horizon, my stomach dropping. Looks like we have more trouble. We followed the pulse to the edge of the city. High in the sky, a massive black vortex was swirling, sucking the light out of the air. What is that? Morong Yao gasped. I think the remnants of that organization aren't done with us yet, I said. Suddenly, swarms of dark shadows flew out of the vortex, diving toward the city like hungry crows. We engaged them immediately, but there were too many. They were stronger than the grunts we'd fought before. We have to close that hole. Morong Yao shouted over the roar of the wind. Go, I yelled, stepping in front of her. I'll hold them off. Find a way to shut it down. I fought like a man possessed, using every trick I knew to keep the shadows away from her. Meanwhile, Murong Yao reached a control console near the vortex's base. It was covered in glowing, ancient runes. She began to work, her fingers flying across the symbols. The shadows realized what she was doing and broke past me. Murong Yao, look out! I warned. She didn't stop. She took a risk, pouring her own energy into the console to override the system. I threw a massive wave of power, blasting the nearest shadows back, but I couldn't catch them all. One of the creatures lunged from the side, striking her hard. She tumbled to the ground, but her hand hit the final sequence. The vortex began to slow. The shadows started to flicker and fade as their power source died. I sprinted to her side and scooped her up. You're okay, you're okay, I muttered, more to myself than her. She smiled, breathless. The vortex, it's closing. The sky cleared. The shadows dissolved into nothingness. We lay there on the cold ground, gasping for air, watching the blue sky return. We had survived again. People began to emerge from their hiding spots, cheering and clapping for us. A few days later, while we were surveying the aftermath near the ruins of the vortex, we found something strange. Buried in the dirt was an old, tattered book. It was an ancient supernatural manual, its cover worn and radiating a faint, mysterious energy. What do you think this is? Murong Yao asked. I flipped through the pages. It was filled with techniques and legends I'd never heard of. This might be the key to getting stronger, to making sure we're ready for whatever comes next. We took the book back to the academy and started studying. The text was incredibly difficult to translate, and Murong Yao spent night after night hunched over it until her eyes were bloodshot. Finally, she looked up at me, a spark of excitement in her tired eyes. Lindy, I think I found something. But she needed more time. I watched Murong Yao hunched over the desk, her face pale from exhaustion. My heart ached for her. I stepped forward and placed a hand on her shoulder. Don't push yourself too hard, I said softly. We can take this slow. As we continued our research, we discovered a mention of a mysterious power gem in the ancient manual. It was said to possess unimaginable strength. If we could find this stone, our abilities would reach a whole new level. I knew we had to find it. Following the clues hidden in the text, we set out on a new journey. The path was brutal. We faced freezing gales, jagged mountain passes, and supernatural monsters that lunged at us from the shadows. But Murong Yao and I never wavered. We supported each other through every step. No matter what lies ahead, we're finding that gem, she said, her voice steady despite the wind. Finally, we reached the mouth of an ancient cave. According to the manual, the gem was hidden deep inside. We stepped into the darkness, but a thick, supernatural mist immediately swallowed us. I couldn't see my own hand in front of my face. Stay sharp, I whispered. There will be traps. Murong Yao nodded, her hands glowing with elemental energy. Suddenly, the ground groaned. The walls vibrated, and hundreds of sharp spikes shot out from the stone. I reacted instantly, pulling Murong Yao behind me and throwing up a shimmering energy shield. The spikes slammed into the barrier and shattered. That was just the start, I warned. We pushed deeper and hit a massive labyrinth. It was a maze of shifting walls and hidden triggers. One wrong step meant death. Murong Yao used her sharp intuition to guide us, navigating the twists and turns. But at a major crossroads, a massive beast intercepted us. It was a nightmare of claws and teeth, roaring as it lunged. We didn't retreat. We fought. After a grueling battle that left us bruised and breathless, we struck the final blow and kept moving. At the very back of the cave, we found a colossal stone door covered in glowing runes. This is it, I said. Murong Yao studied the symbols, her mind racing to find the mechanism. With a low rumble, the door slowly groaned open. A blinding light poured out, filling the chamber. Floating in the center of the room was the power gem, radiating waves of pure energy. We actually found it, I said, my voice filled with excitement. But as we reached for it, an ancient, booming voice echoed through the air. To claim the stone, you must pass the final trial. Suddenly, the room shifted. Phantoms began to swirl around us, showing us our deepest fears and desires. I saw a vision of myself losing my powers, helpless as everyone I loved was slaughtered. Morong Yao saw her family being hunted while she stood paralyzed. It's a test of will, I shouted over the noise. We had to fight the illusions. Morong Yao took a deep breath. Lindy, don't let them trick you. I nodded, gripping my resolve. But the visions changed. A final choice appeared before us like a cruel joke. We could either give up the gem to save a single innocent life, or take the power and watch a city fall into ruin. We stood in the silence of the chamber. We can't sacrifice the innocent for our own gain, Morong Yao said firmly. I agreed. We give up the stone. The moment I spoke, the phantoms vanished. The gem slowly drifted down, landing gently in our hands. You have passed, the voice echoed. The stone is yours. We shared a look and smiled. Real power didn't come from a rock. It came from the strength of our convictions. We brought the gem back to the academy, but its power was even more volatile than we imagined. During a study session, Morong Yao accidentally triggered a hidden frequency. A massive wave of energy exploded outward, covering the entire campus. Within seconds, chaos erupted. Students and teachers lost control of their abilities. Elements flared wildly, and psychic screams filled the air. What's happening? I yelled over the roar of the energy. Morong Yao looked terrified. I don't know. I barely touched it. I rushed out to maintain order, trying to stop the berserk students from hurting each other. Meanwhile, Morong Yao focused everything she had on the gem, trying to communicate with its core. She managed to stabilize the pulse, but then something worse happened. A vein of black shadow leaked out from the stone, crawling up her arm. It was a dark corruption, eating into her mind. Morong Yao? What's wrong? I ran to her, but her eyes had turned cold and distant. Her voice came out as a raspy growl. Lindy, this power. I can't hold it back. My heart hammered against my ribs. I knew if I didn't act now, I would lose her forever. I decided to take a desperate risk. I would dive into her consciousness to pull her back. Hang on. I'm coming for you. I closed my eyes and forced my spirit into her mind. Inside her subconscious, everything was a nightmare of swirling shadows. I found her trapped in the center, her expression twisted in agony. Lindy, get out. It's too dangerous, she screamed. I didn't listen. I charged into the darkness, fighting the shadows with every ounce of my mental strength. Each blow drained me, but I refused to stop. Outside, in the real world, AI, me, and the rest of the team were frantically searching through old records, looking for a way to purge the corruption. Back in the mental world, I finally broke through the barrier and grabbed Morong Yao's hand. Believe in me, I said. We can beat this together. Hope flickered in her eyes. We merged our energies, a blinding white light clashing against the black void. With one final surge, the darkness shattered. We gasped as we returned to our bodies in the real world. Morong Yao collapsed into my arms, her eyes clear again. Just then, Aimi ran into the room. They had found the cure. We were safe, for now. With our combined efforts, the power of the gem was finally under control. The crisis was over. The Supernatural Academy slowly returned to its former peace. My bond with Morong Yao grew even deeper after everything we had endured together. We had faced death and come out stronger. But beneath the calm surface, a dark current was shifting. Not everyone was happy about our victory. Some supernatural beings in the city began to harbor jealousy. They resented the attention and resources my team received. To them, we were just glory seekers stealing the spotlight while they were ignored. One afternoon, Morong Yao and I were walking down the street when a group of supernatural beings blocked our path. Their leader stepped forward with a sneer. Lindy, don't think you're so special, he spat. I frowned, sensing the tension in the air. What do you want? We want you to know that you aren't the only ones who can save this city, another one added, his hands glowing with hostile energy. Morong Yao tried to step in. Please, don't do this. We're all on the same side. We all want peace. They weren't listening. Their anger was too deep. Just as the situation was about to turn violent, a mysterious figure appeared on a nearby rooftop. He let out a chilling laugh. What a pathetic show. I looked up, squinting against the sun. Who are you? The stranger smiled, though his face remained shadowed. Who I am doesn't matter. What matters is that your troubles have only just begun." With those words, he vanished into thin air. Morong Yao and I exchanged a worried look. A much larger conspiracy was unfolding, and we had to be ready. The resentment didn't stay hidden for long. It spread like a virus through the city's supernatural community until it erupted into full-blown rebellion. A radical group calling themselves Shadow Rising emerged. Their goal was simple: topple my team and take control of the city. The attack came without warning. Shadow Rising launched a massive assault on the academy. Morong Yao and I led the defense, but we were outnumbered. The enemy was well-prepared and ruthless. We were being pushed back. "Hold the line," I shouted over the sounds of explosions. Morong Yao unleashed wave after wave of elemental power. She struck down dozens of attackers, but I could see the strain on her face. Her movements were getting slower. She was reaching her limit. "Morong Yao, get back. You need to rest," I yelled, stepping in front of her. I channeled my energy to create a massive shield, blocking a barrage of incoming projectiles. The academy buildings were being torn apart around us. My teammates were fighting hard, but the sheer number of enemies was overwhelming. I realized we couldn't win by just defending. I watched the enemy ranks closely and noticed a pattern. Their attacks followed specific commands. They have leaders in the back, I realized. "Morong Yao, we need to take out those core members." She nodded, forcing herself to stand tall. Together, we charged into the heart of the enemy formation. I cut through the crowd like a whirlwind while she rained down elemental fury. We finally reached the core members, but they were waiting for us. They combined their powers, creating a massive, swirling sphere of dark energy. It hurtled toward us with terrifying speed. "Look out!" I screamed. I shoved Morong Yao out of the way and took the hit full on. The impact was like being hit by a freight train. I was thrown backward, crashing through a stone wall. Everything went black. "Lindy!" Morong Yao's scream was the last thing I heard. When she saw me lying there, covered in blood and unconscious, something inside her snapped. Her eyes blazed with a terrifying light. "You bastards," she hissed. "You'll pay for this." She unleashed an elemental storm so powerful it tore through the battlefield, sending the rebels scattering in terror. With the help of AI Me and Zheng Yuan, they finally managed to drive Shadow Rising out of the academy grounds. Morong Yao rushed me to the infirmary, her heart racing. The doctors worked frantically, but my vitals were dangerously weak. She stayed by my side for 3 days, never leaving, clutching my hand. "Lindy, you can't leave me," she whispered. "We have so much left to do." Aimi walked in, placing a hand on her shoulder. "He's strong, Morong Yao. He'll make it. We've secured the academy, but Shadow Rising is still out there. We have to be ready for their next move." Finally, on the 3rd day, I opened my eyes. Where am I?" My voice was a raspy whisper. Morong Yao burst into tears of relief. "You're awake. You idiot, you scare me to death." I looked at her tired, pale face and felt a pang of guilt. "I'm sorry," I said softly. AI Me and the rest of the team crowded into the room. "Good to have you back, Captain," AI Me said with a grin. "We've been waiting for you to lead the counterattack." I forced a smile. I was weak, but my resolve was stronger than ever. Over the next few weeks, I pushed myself through grueling recovery training. Morong Yao was there every step of the way, supporting me. As my strength returned, so did my powers. "It's time," I told the team as we gathered in the war room. We spread a map of the city across the table. "Our intel says Shadow Rising has set up their headquarters in the abandoned factory district to the north," AI Me explained. "It's a maze in there, and they've fortified it heavily. We can't just barge in," I said. "We need eyes on the inside first." Morong Yao stepped forward. "I can use my elements to cloak myself and slip in. I'll get the layout." I looked at her, worried about the risk. "It's too dangerous." She grabbed my hand, her gaze firm. "I can do this, Lindy. Trust me." I knew she was right. We had to end this. I held her hand tight as we prepared for the most dangerous mission of our lives. "Be careful," I told Morong Yao, my voice heavy with concern. "If you hit any danger, retreat immediately." She gave me a firm nod and vanished into the dark night. The next day, Morong Yao returned safely. She brought back critical intel. The enemy had rigged the area around the factory with supernatural traps, and high-level guards were patrolling every corner. Based on what she saw, I spent the morning refining our plan. We organized an elite squad, ready to deliver a fatal blow to Shadow Rising. Before we moved out, I looked at my team. "This will be a brutal fight," I said, my eyes scanning their faces. "But we're doing this for justice and for the peace of this city. We must win." "Victory!" they shouted in unison. I led the team toward the headquarters. As we neared the rusted shell of the abandoned factory, we moved like ghosts, bypassing the hidden energy traps Murong Yao had flagged. "Stay sharp," I whispered. "Follow the plan." Murong Yao used her elemental powers to shroud us in a veil of concealment. Suddenly, a patrol appeared ahead. I signaled for everyone to drop. We waited, hearts pounding, as they drew closer. "Now," I hissed. We struck as one. Powers flared in the dark, and the patrol was wiped out before they could even scream. We pushed forward until we reached the massive main gates. It was time for the direct assault. "Break it down," I yelled. A concentrated blast of energy tore the gates off their hinges. We stormed inside, colliding with the main force of Shadow Rising. The factory erupted into chaos. Light from supernatural abilities flashed against the grime-covered walls, and the roar of battle was deafening. I was at the front, my powers cutting through the enemy ranks like a scythe. Beside me, Murong Yao was a whirlwind of elemental fury, keeping the guards at bay. "Don't let a single one escape," I shouted. We coordinated our strikes, slowly pinning them into a corner. They fought back with the desperation of cornered rats. The battle reached a fever pitch. Despite our early momentum, the resistance was stubborn. The enemy knew the factory's maze-like layout and used it to stall us. "Watch the floor," someone screamed, but it was too late. Several of my teammates triggered hidden pressure plates and were sent flying by explosive energy. I felt a surge of panic but forced it down. "Stay calm. Cover each other." Murong Yao poured her energy into destroying their defensive barricades, but the counterfire was relentless. She was burning through her reserves just to keep us shielded. "This isn't working," I gritted my teeth. "We need a breakthrough." Then I saw it. A narrow service corridor with thinning defenses. "Everyone, focus fire on that gap. Push through." We threw everything we had at that single point. After a bloody struggle, we broke their line and breached the factory's core. But waiting for us was a group of elite masters. "You won't take another step," their leader sneered. I didn't blink. "Today is the day you fall." The final clash was terrifying. The sheer scale of energy clashing shook the entire foundation of the factory. I threw myself into a life-or-death duel with their strongest fighter. Murong Yao saw I was struggling and leaped to my side. "Lindy, I've got your back." Together, our combined powers began to overwhelm him. He screamed in rage, but it was useless. I saw an opening and delivered a finishing strike that sent him crashing into the machinery. With their leader defeated, the organization's morale shattered. We swept through the rest of the facility, ending the threat once and for all. We did it. The team cheered, collapsing in exhaustion. Murong Yao and I held each other tight, both of us covered in soot and blood. We were tired, but we were smiling. Still, a small part of me knew this was just the beginning. In the days that followed, the city looked like a graveyard of concrete. Murong Yao and I stood among the ruins, watching the recovery efforts. "We paid a heavy price for this," she whispered. I nodded. "But the city is free." We organized the survivors and the instructors from the academy to begin the long process of rebuilding. As we cleared the rubble, I couldn't stop thinking. "We should have seen this coming sooner," I told her. "Maybe we could have saved more people." She squeezed my hand. "We did our best, Lindy. We learned our lesson the hard way." We started planning a new defense system, something stronger and more regulated to ensure no group, like Shadow Rising, could ever rise again. Slowly, life began to return to the streets. But peace was a fleeting dream. Just as the city started to breathe again, a new nightmare emerged. A mysterious virus began spreading through the population. It was terrifying. Anyone infected would lose their supernatural powers and fall into a deep coma. "This is moving too fast," I said as we reviewed the hospital reports. "We have to find the source." We spent days tracking the infection, visiting families and hospitals. Every clue pointed toward a hidden underground laboratory. Another enemy? Morong Yao asked, her face grim. Likely, I replied. And we need to be ready for anything. We eventually tracked the signal to a deep subterranean facility. It was filled with strange glass vats and high-tech instruments. This is it, Morong Yao whispered. The nursery for the virus. Suddenly, a group of figures in hazmat suits blocked our path. Who are you to trespass here? One demanded. The people who are going to stop you, I barked. We lunged forward. As we fought, I realized these weren't normal guards. Their powers felt wrong, unnatural, and heavily modified. We can't stay bogged down here, I shouted over the sound of clashing energy. We have to find the cure and get out. Morong Yao nodded, and we fought side by side, pushing deeper into the heart of the infection. We pushed deeper into the laboratory, searching for the key equipment behind this virus. Every step was a gamble. The facility was a death trap, rigged with lethal mechanisms designed to keep intruders out. Watch your head, Morong Yao screamed. I lunged to the side just as a massive stone slab crashed down from the ceiling, shattering the floor where I had been standing a second ago. We didn't stop to catch our breath. We kept moving until a heavy door blocked our path, humming with a high-voltage current. Let me try to break it with elemental power, Morong Yao said. She focused her mind, channeling a massive surge of energy into the door. It shuddered, but the sparks didn't fade. She pulled back, her face pale. It's no use. The defense is too strong. I scanned the walls and spotted a control terminal nearby. Maybe I can shut it down from here. I ran to the console and started bypass protocols, my fingers flying across the keys. But the facility wasn't done with us. Armed guards appeared from the shadows, opening fire. We were trapped between the electrified door and a squad of killers. Lin Yuan, hurry up. I can't hold them off forever. Morong Yao shouted, her energy shields flickering under the heavy fire. Sweat poured down my face. I ignored the bullets whizzing past and focused entirely on the code. Finally, a sharp beep echoed through the hall. The hum of the door died instantly. It's open, I yelled. We bolted through the entrance and dove deeper into the heart of the lab. In the center of a massive chamber sat a giant petri dish, pulsing with a sickly light. It was the virus mother lode. If we destroyed this, the infection would die with it. This is it, I said, stepping forward. You really think it's that simple? A voice drifted from the shadows. A mysterious figure stepped into the light, watching us with cold, mocking eyes. I felt a chill run down my spine. Who are you? I demanded. Why are you doing this? The stranger let out a dry laugh. You don't need to know. You just need to die. Before I could respond, the figure unleashed a wave of terrifying energy. This wasn't a normal supernatural power. It was twisted and erratic. We fought back with everything we had, but the stranger's movements were a blur. Morong Yao, look out! I cried. She tried to dodge, but the energy blast caught her square in the chest. She hit the floor hard. Seeing her fall triggered something inside me. Rage boiled over, and I unleashed a burst of power that forced the stranger back. But as we traded blows, I realized something was wrong. They weren't trying to kill us quickly. They were stalling. Something's wrong, I grunted. They're waiting for something. Right then, a piercing alarm began to wail throughout the facility. The equipment around us began to spark and malfunction, and the virus mother lode in the vat started glowing violently. It was becoming unstable. We have to destroy it now, Morong Yao yelled, struggling back to her feet. I ignored the stranger and charged the vat. The figure tried to intercept me, but Morong Yao threw herself into the fray, pinning them down. I reached the mother lode and gathered every ounce of my remaining power. This ends now, I warned. The light from my attack blinded everything in the room. A massive explosion rocked the facility, and a pungent, acrid smell filled the air. The virus mother lode was gone. The mysterious figure let out a primal scream of fury. You'll pay for this. All of you. Then, in a flash of dark energy, they vanished. The adrenaline left me all at once. Morong Yao and I collapsed to the floor, breathing heavily as the facility crumbled around us. In the days that followed, the city began to heal. Without the mother lode, the virus weakened. People woke up from their comas, and their powers returned. We were hailed as heroes, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we had only won a single battle in a much larger war. We can't let our guard down, I told Murong Yao as we watched the city lights. That person is still out there. She nodded grimly. The academy stepped up its research and defenses, and we spent every waking hour training, pushing our limits for the next inevitable clash. Then, a letter arrived. It had no return address, just a single line of text. The truth is waiting for you in the distance. Is this a trap? Murong Yao asked, staring at the paper. Probably, I said, narrowing my eyes. But we can't just sit here and wait. We have to find out what this means. We followed the clues in the letter, traveling far beyond the city limits. After weeks of searching, we found ourselves standing before the ruins of an ancient site. The air was thick with a strange, heavy pressure. Strange symbols and carvings covered the crumbling walls. This place feels wrong, Murong Yao whispered. The truth is in here somewhere, I replied. We stepped inside, our boots crunching on the old stone. The silence was deafening. Suddenly, the floor gave way. We jumped back just as a row of hidden blades shot out from the walls. I threw up a shield, the metal clanging against my energy barrier. Watch your step, I warned, wiping sweat from my forehead. We moved deeper, navigating a maze of pressure plates and swinging traps. Suddenly, the floor beneath Murong Yao flipped over. She plummeted into the darkness. I lunged forward, catching her hand at the last possible second and hauling her back up. Thanks, she breathed, her heart racing. Before we could recover, a thick black smoke began pouring into the corridor. It moved with a life of its own, swallowing the light. Don't breathe it in, I shouted. We stumbled through the darkness, blinded and choking. Then, a low roar vibrated through the floor. A massive, shadow-covered beast lunged out of the smoke, its claws reaching for our throats. We split up instantly. I blasted the creature's head with a concentrated burst of energy, while Murong Yao flanked it, her elemental strikes carving deep wounds into its hide. After a brutal struggle, the beast finally collapsed. We stood over its body, gasping for air, our clothes torn and our bodies bruised. No matter how many traps they set, I said, looking into the dark heart of the ruins. We're finding the truth. We pushed deeper into the ruins, not knowing what other dangers were waiting for us in the shadows. The corridors were a tangled mess, twisting and turning until they felt like a giant, suffocating maze. After a while, everything started to look the same. Lin Yuan, I think we're going in circles, Murong Yao said, her brow furrowed as she scanned the identical stone walls. I stopped and looked around, trying to find any landmark. We have to find the right path soon, or we'll be trapped here forever. We started carving marks into the walls, hoping to find a pattern or a way out. But after walking for what felt like hours, we were still lost. The frustration was starting to set in. This isn't working, Murong Yao muttered, her voice tinged with anxiety. Just then, I spotted something on the dusty floor. Strange footprints. They looked old, but they were a lead. Maybe someone else found the way. Let's follow these. We trailed the prints into a narrow, cramped passage. A foul, rotting stench filled the air, making my stomach churn. I kept my hand near my weapon. Stay sharp. Something feels off. Suddenly, the ceiling groaned. Large stones began raining down from above. I grabbed Murong Yao's arm and yanked her back just in time. Then, the entire corridor started to shake violently. It was collapsing. Run, I yelled. We sprinted through the narrow gap, the sound of crashing stone echoing right behind our heels. Dust choked my lungs, but I didn't stop. We burst through the end of the tunnel just as it caved in completely. We found ourselves in a massive, open hall. Ancient statues lined the walls, their stone eyes glowing with an eerie, unnatural light. Murong Yao stood back to back with me, her eyes darting around the room. What is this place? I stepped toward one of the statues, narrowing my eyes. There might be a clue hidden here. The moment I spoke, the statues groaned. Their heavy stone limbs creaked and moved. They weren't decorations, they were guardians. Huge stone arms swung toward us with crushing force. We dove in opposite directions as the floor cracked under their weight. These things are tough, I shouted over the din. We need to find a weakness. Murong Yao unleashed a blast of elemental power, trying to freeze them in place. A surge of energy radiated from the statues, shattering her ice instantly. I watched their movements closely, looking for a flaw in their design. I saw it. The joints. Morong Yao, aim for the joints. She understood immediately. She focused her power into sharp, concentrated strikes, hammering the statue's knees and elbows. With every hit, their movements slowed. I saw my opening and gathered a massive burst of energy in my palms. I released it in one final shockwave, blasting the statues until they crumbled into heaps of rubble. Silence returned to the hall. Morong Yao let out a long breath. Finally, that was too close. We searched the hall for any remaining secrets and found a wall covered in strange, intricate patterns. This has to be the key to the puzzle, I said. We studied the symbols together. They weren't just art. They were an ancient code. Morong Yao spent a long time analyzing the sequence, her fingers tracing the carvings. After a few tense minutes, she gave a small nod. She pressed a series of symbols, and the wall began to slide open with a heavy rumble. Let's go, I said, stepping into the new passage. I hope this leads to the truth. The tunnel ended in a room that took my breath away. Every surface, the walls, the floor, the ceiling, was covered in shimmering, glowing runes. The air hummed with raw power. These runes, they're overflowing with energy, Morong Yao whispered, reaching out toward the wall. Careful, I warned, but it was too late. The moment her fingers brushed a rune, the room exploded with light. A massive force slammed into us, pinning us to the floor. I tried to move, but I was paralyzed. My energy felt like it was being drained away, suppressed by the room itself. We have to break free, I growled, gritting my teeth against the pressure. We both fought with everything we had, pushing our internal power against the invisible weight. Finally, I felt a tiny crack in the energy field. With one final surge, we broke the binding and rolled away. Before we could recover, the air began to shimmer. Phantoms appeared all around us, ghostly images of the past. It was a vision of an ancient war. We watched in silence as supernatural beings tore each other apart in a landscape of fire and blood. Look, Morong Yao pointed. They're fighting over something. In the center of the chaos, a group of people held a mysterious object. Then the scene shifted to a dark, twisted ritual. A wave of pure evil erupted from the center, swallowing the world in darkness. Is this where it all started? I wondered aloud. The phantoms vanished as quickly as they had appeared. In their place, in a dusty corner of the room, lay an old, leather-bound book. I picked it up, and the moment I cracked the cover, a vortex of energy pulled us in. We landed in a void of endless darkness. The only thing we could see was a faint light flickering in the distance. Where are we? Morong Yao's voice trembled slightly. I grabbed her hand. Don't worry. We'll find a way out. A voice boomed from the darkness, cold and ancient. To leave this place, you must pass the test. Suddenly, bolts of energy shot at us from the void. We moved in perfect sync, dodging and shielding. The attacks were relentless, coming faster and faster. We can't just keep dodging, I shouted. Look for the rhythm. We realized the attacks followed the pulse of the energy in the room. Morong Yao used her senses to track the waves. Lin Yuan, follow me. We wove through the gaps in the attacks, sprinting toward the light. At the center stood a massive, pulsating energy core. If we destroy that, the test ends. We combined our power into one singular beam of light, striking the core with everything we had. It shattered with a deafening roar, and the dark space began to crumble around us. When the dust settled, we were back in the rune room. But we weren't alone. A mysterious figure stood in the center of the chamber. You've finally arrived, the figure said, its voice echoing. I stepped forward, my hand on my weapon. Who are you? I am the messenger who guards this place, the figure replied. The truth you've been searching for is right here. The messenger began to speak, his voice carrying the weight of centuries. He told us an ancient story. Long ago, a powerful supernatural being hungered for infinite power. He performed a forbidden ritual, releasing an ancient evil that had been sealed within these ruins ever since. That mysterious letter I received wasn't just a message. It was a guide, meant to bring someone strong enough to stop that evil from waking up. The seal is breaking, the messenger warned. Only you can stop it. Morong Yao and I shared a quick look. I could see the same resolve in her eyes that I felt in my chest. I asked him what we had to do. He handed me a mysterious artifact, its surface humming with a strange energy. He told us we had to use it to seal the source of the evil, but he didn't sugarcoat it. This would be a fight for our lives. I gripped the artifact tightly. I wasn't backing down now. With the messenger pointing the way, we headed deeper into the heart of the ruins. We eventually reached the deepest chamber. A massive, swirling vortex of darkness stood before us, spitting out waves of pure malice. This was it. I gripped the artifact until my knuckles turned white. Morong Yao took a deep breath and told me she was ready. We stepped into the vortex. Immediately, the pressure hit us like a physical wall. Shadows lunged at us from the dark, twisted shapes screaming as they attacked. I unleashed my powers, tearing through the spectral figures, while Morong Yao conjured an elemental shield to keep the darkness at bay. The deeper we went, the heavier the air became. Our energy was draining fast. I shouted for her to keep going, refusing to let the fatigue win. Finally, we reached the core. A massive black crystal sat there, radiating an aura of absolute terror. Without a second thought, we pointed the artifact at the crystal and channeled every bit of our remaining strength into it. The crystal shuddered. It fought back, lashing out with bursts of dark energy that nearly knocked us off our feet. I gritted my teeth, forcing the light from the artifact to stay steady. After a blinding flash and a roar that shook the very earth, the crystal was sealed. The darkness vanished. But we weren't safe yet. With the evil gone, the ruins began to collapse. Huge stone blocks crashed down around us. I grabbed Morong Yao's hand, and we bolted for the exit. We sprinted through the crumbling tunnels, dust filling our lungs, until we finally burst out into the open air. The sun hit my face, warm and bright. We had actually made it. Morong Yao was beaming with excitement, but I could only manage a tired smile. We had won this battle, but I knew our job wasn't over. We still had a world to protect. Back in the city, the atmosphere was electric. People felt the darkness lift, and they flooded the streets to cheer. We were hailed as heroes, but while we waved at the crowds, my mind was already on what came next. Peace returned for a while, but in my line of work, peace never lasts. It started with small flickers of strange energy. They were weak, but they didn't feel right. Morong Yao noticed it too. Something was brewing in the shadows. We traced the fluctuations back to the city's underground. I decided we needed to see what was down there. I gathered a team of our strongest allies, and we headed into the tunnels. The air grew cold the further down we went. I warned everyone to stay sharp. We stumbled upon a hidden facility filled with strange symbols and high-tech lab equipment. It looked like someone was running illegal supernatural experiments. Suddenly, a low roar echoed through the corridor. A massive, twisted creature lunged out of the darkness. It was a nightmare of flesh and energy. My team panicked for a second, but I stepped forward and told them to focus. We fought hard, Morong Yao and I leading the charge. We found its weakness, the underbelly, and finally brought the beast down. As the monster collapsed, the same question burned in our minds. Who was creating these things? We searched the lab and found a hidden file. It laid out a terrifying conspiracy. A secret organization had been experimenting on supernatural beings, trying to create a weapon that could control all of us. These monsters were just the prototypes. Morong Yao was furious, and I was right there with her. We couldn't let this stand. We grabbed the evidence and headed back to the surface to expose them, but the organization was already one step ahead. They knew we had the files. Suddenly, we were being hunted. Killers from the organization swarmed the streets, guns and powers blazing. It was a chaotic chase through the city alleys. We managed to duck into a side street to catch our breath, but we knew we couldn't stay. We had to get out of the city to a safe house. Every corner we turned, their scouts were waiting. Just when it felt like we were trapped, I spotted an abandoned armored vehicle. We piled in, slammed the engine to life, and plowed through their blockade. While I drove, Morong Yao managed to reach our allies on the radio. They were coming to help. I pushed the vehicle to its limit through the ruins of the outskirts until I saw the familiar faces of our reinforcements. We were safe, for now. But the real war against this secret organization was just beginning. I met up with Morong Yao and our allies at a hidden base. We had one goal: Destroy the secret organization once and for all. I looked at the determined faces around me. We had to find their headquarters and crush their plans before they could unleash that virus. Everyone agreed. We spent days gathering intelligence, digging through leads until we finally pinpointed their location. Morong Yao warned us that it would be a brutal fight, but I knew we couldn't back down. We gathered every ounce of strength we had and marched toward their stronghold. Enemies tried to block our path, but the combined power of our alliance pushed through everything they threw at us. As we neared the headquarters, the air grew thick with tension. I told everyone to stay sharp. Battle could break out at any second. Morong Yao checked her supernatural gear, her eyes cold and steady. We crouched outside the main courtyard, observing their defenses. They were ready for us. I took a deep breath. It didn't matter. We were going in. We mapped out a detailed plan and assigned specific tasks to every team member. We had to move as one. With a single command, I gave the signal to charge. The clash was instant and violent. Supernatural energy lit up the sky like fireworks, and the roar of battle was deafening. I tapped into my core power, unleashing a wave of energy that leveled a dozen guards in an instant. Beside me, Morong Yao became a whirlwind of elemental fury. She controlled fire, frost, and lightning, tearing holes through the enemy's defensive line to protect our flanks. I screamed for the team to push forward, and we hit them like a tidal wave, breaking their first line of defense. But they weren't giving up. The organization poured in fresh reinforcements, raining down supernatural attacks like a storm. People on our side were getting hit, but no one retreated. On the other side of the field, AI Mi was incredible. Her sensory abilities allowed her to predict incoming strikes before they happened. She shouted warnings over the chaos, saving lives left and right. When one of our teammates went down, others rushed in to drag them to safety, treating wounds while still firing back. Morong Yao's rage boiled over as she saw our friends getting hurt. She unleashed a massive burst of elemental energy, shouting that today would be their end. I moved through the enemy ranks like a god of war, my strikes precise and lethal. I didn't give them a second to breathe. Just as we reached the core area, a massive energy shield shimmered into existence, blocking our path. We hit it with everything we had, but it didn't even flicker. We were stuck until AI Mi spotted a tiny fluctuation in the shield's frequency. She found the weak point. I didn't hesitate. I funneled every bit of my power into my fist and lunged. There was a bone-shaking explosion as the shield cracked. The team saw the opening and doubled their efforts until the barrier shattered into 1,000 pieces. We surged inside. The interior of the headquarters was a nightmare. It was dark, narrow, and smelled of death. I led the way, using the glow of my powers to light the path. Traps were everywhere. Suddenly, rows of steel spikes shot out from the walls. I grabbed Morong Yao and pulled her back just in time as the team scrambled to dodge. It was only the beginning. Massive boulders plummeted from the ceiling, and I had to blast them into dust so we could keep moving. Then, the shadows moved. A group of hidden assassins ambushed us in the narrow corridors. I let out a roar, releasing a shockwave that forced them out of hiding. We engaged in a frantic, close-quarters brawl until the last of them fell. This place was a maze, and we were running out of time. That's when I heard it, a low, guttural growl echoing from the darkness ahead. A massive supernatural beast stepped into the light, its presence so heavy it made my skin crawl. I tightened my grip. We had to face it. The monster lunged with terrifying speed and power. I met it head-on, my energy clashing against its brute force in a series of violent explosions. Morong Yao didn't miss a beat, conjuring elemental blades that sliced through the air toward the beast. The rest of the team joined in, and the final struggle for the heart of the facility truly began. A barrage of supernatural attacks rained down on the beast. It didn't matter. Its defense was incredible, and our powers barely left a scratch on its thick hide. The monster let out a deafening roar, its movements becoming even more frantic and violent. One of my team members couldn't dodge in time. A massive claw slammed into him, sending him flying across the room. "Careful," I shouted. Morong Yao rushed to his side to check his injuries. "Hang on," she urged him. "We're going to win this." I kept the beast busy, circling it while my mind raced for a strategy. Every monster has a weakness. I just had to find it. AI me was watching the creature's movements from the sidelines. Suddenly, she pointed and yelled, "The eyes! Its eyes are the weak point." I didn't hesitate. I blurred into motion, lunging straight for the beast's face. It sensed my intent and tried to shield its head with its massive forearms. "Distract it. Now," I commanded. The team unleashed everything they had. Flashes of light and elemental bursts filled the air, creating a chaotic screen of interference. The beast struggled to track all the targets at once, losing focus on me for a split second. That was all I needed. I closed the gap, channeled every ounce of my energy into my fist, and struck its eye with a devastating blow. The creature let out a pained, guttural shriek. Its massive body began to wobble. "Finish it," Morong Yao cried. The team launched a final, coordinated assault. A rain of energy beams and elemental strikes buried the beast. Finally, the massive frame crashed to the floor and went still. We had done it, and the team started to cheer, but Morong Yao and I shared a look. We knew the real fight was just beginning. We pushed deeper into the facility, heading straight for the core. We finally reached the heart of the headquarters. The sight stopped us in our tracks. A massive laboratory stretched out before us, filled with complex machinery and glowing equipment. "This is it," I said, my eyes scanning the room for threats. The center of everything. Morong Yao walked up to a console, staring at the scrolling data with a confused frown. "What is all this? It looks like they're running some kind of horrific experiment." One of the team members spotted something. "Lin Yuan, over here. There's a hidden room." We stepped inside. The space was crammed with files and research papers. I picked up a document, and my stomach dropped. My face went grim as I read the headers. "It's a research plan," I whispered. "They're trying to use supernatural energy to create a weapon that can control the entire world." Morong Yao's eyes widened in shock. "That's insane. We can't let them succeed." AI me flipped through more files, her voice turning urgent. "I found something critical. It looks like they're already close to finishing it." I frowned. We had to find the final prototype and destroy it before it was too late. But as the team began to search the lab, a piercing alarm blared through the halls. The lights shifted to a deep, menacing red. "We tripped a sensor," I grunted. A group of elite fighters from the organization stepped out from the shadows, blocking our path. Their leader stepped forward, his eyes cold. "You won't interfere with our plans." I stepped to the front, my power surging. "Today is the day your organization falls." The battle exploded instantly. Light from clashing powers illuminated the lab as Morong Yao and I engaged the elites in a life-or-death struggle. The rest of the team fought desperately to hold off the other guards. As we traded blows, I realized these fighters were different. Their powers had been artificially enhanced. They were fast, strong, and incredibly dangerous. "Watch out," I warned the others. "These guys aren't normal." Morong Yao unleashed a wave of elemental force, pushing one of the elites back. "It doesn't matter. We have to stop them." The air in the lab felt like it was on fire from the sheer amount of energy being released. I struck hard, but the enemies moved with terrifying precision, dodging my hits and countering from my blind spots. They worked together like a single machine. It was frustrating. I grit my teeth, sweat stinging my eyes. These guys were a nightmare to deal with. Morong Yao was also feeling the pressure. Her elemental attacks were powerful, but the enemies seemed to know her patterns, slipping away just before her strikes landed. "Lin Yuan, I can't hold them off much longer," she shouted. I glanced back, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Just a little longer. We'll find a way through." AI, me, and the others were reaching their limits. Their energy was draining fast, and fatigue was setting in. Then, tragedy struck. One of our teammates took a direct hit and collapsed. "No," the others cried out in grief and rage. Seeing my comrade fall lit a fire in my soul. "You bastards. You're going to pay for that." I let out a massive shockwave of energy, forcing the enemies back and giving us some breathing room. Morong Yao took the opportunity to regroup and reorganize her attack. "Focus our fire," I commanded. "Take them down one by one." The team followed my lead. We concentrated all our power on a single elite, finally breaking through his defense and taking him down. The enemies didn't retreat, though. They became even more aggressive. Equipment shattered around us, sending sparks flying into the air. The lab was becoming a death trap. I kept my eyes peeled for any opening. There, I saw a flaw in their formation. Without hesitating, I lunged forward, delivering a lethal strike to the next target. That blow changed everything. It was the turning point we needed. Seeing an elite fall gave the team a second wind. Morong Yao ramped up her elemental output, trapping more enemies in a swirling vortex of power. Keep going. We're almost there, she encouraged the team. AI Me used her sensory abilities to guide us, calling out enemy positions before they could strike. 3 more on the left. Get ready. The team shifted instantly, meeting the charge and repelling it. Under our relentless pressure, the organization's elites began to crumble. Their movement slowed. Their coordination broke. I seized the moment, launching another massive attack that neutralized another fighter. Yes, the team cheered. Don't stop now, I said, my voice cold. Give them no room to breathe. The tide had turned completely. Our morale was soaring while the enemy numbers dwindled. Finally, only the leader of the elite squad remained. He stood his ground, defiant even as we surrounded him. Give up, I told him. You've lost. He let out a dry, mocking laugh. Even if I die, you'll never stop what's already been set in motion. I didn't waste any more words. I unleashed my strongest technique, ending the fight once and for all. The lab was a wreck, covered in debris and smoke, but there was no time to rest. We had to find the weapon. After a tense search through the ruins, we found it. Hidden behind a reinforced bulkhead sat a strange, pulsing device. It radiated a terrifying amount of supernatural energy. The final project was right in front of us. This must be it, I said, my voice heavy with gravity. The weapon they planned to use to control the world. I stared at the pulsing device. Morong Yao stepped forward, her eyes scanning the intricate machinery. It looked volatile. Every second it sat there, the air grew thicker with a dangerous, static charge. We have to destroy it. Now, she urged. But as we moved to strike, the machine roared to life. A blinding light exploded from its core, followed by a violent surge of energy. The ground buckled. It's losing control, I yelled. A massive shockwave ripped through the lab. My teammates were tossed aside like rag dolls, hitting the floor hard. The energy was suffocating, threatening to swallow the entire room whole. Everyone get back, I commanded, shielding my eyes. The fluctuations grew more violent. Morong Yao forced herself to her feet, her face set in grim determination. She began channeling her elemental power, trying to create a containment field around the device. Lindy, let me try to stop it, she cried out. Be careful, Morong Yao, I shouted back, my heart racing. She focused every ounce of her strength, pouring her elemental energy directly into the pulsing core. For a moment, the blinding light dimmed. The vibrations slowed, but I could see her trembling. I can't hold it much longer, she gasped, her voice strained with pain. I felt a surge of desperation. I scanned the room, searching for any way to shut it down manually. That's when AI Me spotted something. Lindy, there's a hidden console over here, she screamed. I sprinted toward it, my fingers flying over the controls. I had never seen this interface before, but I didn't have a choice. I had to figure it out. No time left. Morong Yao's voice was a ragged plea. Hurry. Sweat poured down my face, stinging my eyes. My hands blurred across the screen. At the very last second, I slammed my palm onto the final command. The humming stopped. The light vanished. Silence crashed down on the lab. That was too close, one of my teammates muttered, exhaling a breath he'd been holding for a lifetime. I rushed to Morong Yao's side and caught her before she could collapse. Are you okay? She gave me a weak, tired smile. I'm fine, as long as that thing is dead. We had won. We spent the following hours clearing the wreckage and gathering every scrap of data we could find. We found member lists, contact codes, and encrypted files. This will help us hunt down whoever is pulling the strings, I said, gripping a folder tightly. We also found their research logs. They were filled with horrific experiments and unfinished projects that made my skin crawl. If we hadn't stopped them here, the world wouldn't have stood a chance. When we finally stepped out of the headquarters, the sun was rising. The warmth felt like a gift. We did it, the team cheered. Word of our victory spread fast. As we entered the city, People lined the streets. They called us heroes, their cheers echoing between the buildings. I smiled at the crowd, but my mind was already moving forward. This is just the beginning, I told Morong Yao. As long as evil exists, we can't stop. In the days that followed, the city returned to its usual rhythm. Morong Yao and I sat on a park bench, finally enjoying a moment of peace. I'm exhausted, she admitted, leaning back with a relaxed smile. Me too, I said. But we can't let our guard down. We don't know what's coming next. She took my hand. Whatever it is, we'll face it together. We spent that time reflecting. We talked about our mistakes and how we could improve. Our coordination needed to be tighter. Some of our members hadn't fully mastered their abilities yet. We also realized that having power wasn't enough. We had to ensure that supernatural abilities were used for the good of humanity, not as a weapon of fear. We visited the injured teammates and helped the citizens affected by the battle. Seeing life return to normal made every scar worth it. But I knew the road ahead was long. To prepare for the future, we established a high-intensity training base. I took charge of the individual sessions. Focus, I told the recruits. Feel the energy flowing inside you. Control it before you release it. I watched them push their limits, day after day. Meanwhile, Morong Yao focused on the bigger picture, teamwork. She ran simulation after simulation, putting them in impossible scenarios. The team is always stronger than the individual, she barked during a drill. Trust each other. One group failed a simulation because they didn't communicate. She didn't go easy on them. You failed because you didn't talk, she said sternly. Again, get it right this time. They tried again, and this time, they moved as one unit. One for offense, one for defense, one for support. They won. Beyond the physical, I started psychological training. Power is useless if you panic. I locked them in dark rooms, forcing them to face their own shadows and stay calm under pressure. Don't be afraid, I told them. The darkness is only as strong as you allow it to be. I told the recruits to believe in themselves, to overcome the fear that darkness brings. Outside the rooms, Morong Yao cheered them on, her voice steady and encouraging. After weeks of grueling training, their power levels soared. Their teamwork was seamless, and their mental grit was like iron. We were finally ready for whatever came next. Or so I thought. One afternoon, a strange figure appeared at the gates of our base. He wore a long black robe and a mask that hid every feature of his face. I stepped forward, my hand hovering near my weapon. Who are you? I asked, my voice sharp. What do you want? The man didn't answer. He walked into the base with a slow, deliberate stride. A massive wave of supernatural energy radiated off him. My team closed in, surrounding him, ready for a fight. Finally, the man spoke. I am here to give you a warning, he said. I frowned. A warning? About what? A much greater dark power is rising, he replied coldly. Everything you've done so far is just a drop in the ocean. Morong Yao stepped up beside me. It doesn't matter what kind of power it is. We won't back down. The man let out a chilling laugh. You're naive. This power is beyond anything you can imagine. He turned to leave. I shouted for him to wait, to explain himself, but he vanished into thin air. He was just gone. The base erupted into whispers. The team was shaken. Was there really a bigger enemy out there? I took a deep breath and looked at my people. Don't let his words scare you, I told them. We stay the course. We train harder. Morong Yao agreed, but I could see the look in her eyes. A shadow had been cast over our hearts. We couldn't just ignore this. We had to know the truth. Morong Yao and I started digging through the leftover files from the previous organization. We spent days buried in messy, encrypted documents. Eventually, I found a lead in a hidden file. It's linked to an ancient legend, I told her. She leaned in close. What kind of legend? I explained that a long time ago, a powerful supernatural being fell into darkness while seeking ultimate power. His strength was so terrifying that it had to be sealed away in a secret location. You think this is the power the masked man meant? She asked. I nodded. It was the only thing that made sense. We traveled to a remote village to find answers. We met an old man who trembled when we mentioned the legend. He called it a cursed power that would bring endless disaster if released. He told us that only those with unwavering faith and immense strength could stand against it. We thanked him and moved on. The trail led us to an ancient, abandoned castle. Vines choked the stone walls, and the air smelled of rot and dust. "Stay sharp," I whispered. As we stepped inside, a cold wind swept through the halls. Suddenly, shadows lunged from the corners. They weren't human. They were like guardians made of darkness. We fought them off with everything we had, our powers lighting up the gloom. Once the shadows were gone, we searched the basement and found an old diary. It contained secrets about the dark energy that confirmed our worst fears. Next, the clues led us to a misty cavern. The ground shook as we entered, and boulders began crashing down from the ceiling. We ran for our lives, barely making it out before the tunnel collapsed. We were exhausted, but we didn't stop. The final clue brought us to a set of ancient ruins filled with glowing runes and lethal traps. As we stepped on a stone floor, it groaned. Suddenly, hundreds of silver blades shot from the walls. I threw up an energy shield just in time. "That was close," Murong Yao panted. We reached a massive stone door covered in strange symbols. It was a puzzle. Murong Yao remembered seeing similar symbols in the old research files. Together, we cracked the code. The door groaned open to reveal a massive hall. In the center sat a giant crystal ball, pulsing with an eerie, rhythmic light. "This is it," I said. But as we approached, the crystal let out a violent blast of energy. It threw us both backward across the floor. It wasn't going to let us take it easily. I tried to communicate with the energy, but it shoved my consciousness back. Murong Yao tried to soothe it with elemental power, but the crystal only grew more violent. "What now?" she asked, her voice tight with stress. I watched the light. I watched the way the energy ebbed and flowed. There was a pattern, a rhythm hidden in the chaos. "We need to sync our power with its pulse," I told her. We tried again, feeding our energy into the crystal in perfect timing with its heartbeat. Slowly, the light stabilized. The violent shaking stopped. It finally accepted us. "We did it," Murong Yao whispered, a smile breaking across her face. But the victory felt short-lived. The crystal began to glow with a new, deeper intensity. Something was happening. Just when I thought we had the crystal ball under control, a more powerful force exploded from its core. The energy hit me and Murong Yao like a physical wall. It was a backlash. My body felt like it was being pierced by 1,000 needles. My internal energy began to spiral out of control, tearing at my veins. "Hold on." I grit my teeth, forcing the words out. Murong Yao groaned in agony, her face pale, but she stayed conscious. We tried to push back against the tide of power, but it was too much. We were being swallowed. Just as the energy was about to consume us, a thought flashed through my mind. "Murong Yao, channel the energy into the ground." I shouted. She understood instantly. We linked our powers, acting as a bridge. We diverted the crystal's violent overflow down through our bodies and into the stone floor. It was a brutal struggle, but slowly, the pressure eased. The crystal finally settled into a calm, steady glow. "That was too close," Murong Yao panted, collapsing onto the floor. I was exhausted, but I couldn't rest yet. As the light stabilized, images began to flicker inside the crystal. It was a record of the past. I saw the origins of the dark power we were fighting. It wasn't natural. It had been sealed here by someone long ago. "The seal is weakening," Murong Yao whispered, watching the flickering images. "The darkness is coming back." The crystal showed us a ritual, a specific ceremony needed to reinforce the seal. It was our only hope. We searched the ruins until we found a hidden chamber containing an ancient book. It detailed the steps and the materials required. The items were rare, scattered across the world. "Where are we going to find all this?" Murong Yao asked, looking at the list. "We go back to the base," I decided. "We need the whole team for this." Back at headquarters, I briefed the team. We didn't have time to waste. I split us into groups. Aimi took a team to an ancient mountain range to find a rare ore. It was dangerous territory, guarded by a massive mutated beast. They had a hell of a fight, but they coordinated perfectly and secured the ore. Another group headed into a misty, trap-filled forest for a unique herb. They had to move inch by inch to avoid being impaled or poisoned, but they got the job done. Meanwhile, Murong Yao and I tracked down the remaining ingredients. After days of nonstop work, we finally had everything we needed. We set up the ritual site in a secret location, drawing a massive, complex magic circle. Every line had to be perfect. One wrong stroke, and the whole thing would blow up in our faces. Murong Yao handled the runes with surgical precision while the rest of the team set up a defensive perimeter. The energy in this rune is unstable, she noted, her brow drenched in sweat. I need to recalibrate. We worked through the night. Just as the circle was finished, the air grew cold. I felt a familiar, sickening pressure. The dark organization had found us. They're here, I yelled. A horde of warriors in black armor stormed the camp. They were powerful, and there were dozens of them. The team immediately engaged, but we were outnumbered. Hold the line, I shouted, joining the fray. Murong Yao unleashed waves of elemental power, blasting back the first wave, but more kept coming. We were being pushed back toward the ritual circle. We have to start the ritual now. Murong Yao cried out over the sound of explosions. I nodded. Lead the defense. I'll trigger the sequence. She rallied the team, creating a wall of fire and ice to buy me time. I stepped into the center of the circle and began the incantation. I placed the rare materials at the key nodes, my hands moving in a blur. I ignored the screams and the clashing of steel behind me. At the exact moment the enemy threatened to break our line, I slammed my palms onto the center rune. A pillar of blinding white light shot into the sky. The shockwave sent the black-armored attackers flying backward. It's working, Murong Yao shouted, her voice full of hope. The dark energy in the air began to wither, suppressed by the ritual's light. But the enemy wasn't finished. They launched a desperate, final assault. A high-ranking commander charged straight for me, intending to break my concentration and ruin the ritual. Murong Yao didn't hesitate. She threw herself between us, her eyes glowing with elemental fury. You're not getting past me, she hissed. She unleashed her full power, meeting the commander head-on in a clash that shook the very earth beneath our feet. I kept my focus on the light, knowing that if I faltered now, everything we had sacrificed would be for nothing. With Murong Yao and the rest of my team holding the line, the enemy's assault finally began to wither. The energy from the ritual reached its peak. The blinding light intensified, and with one final surge, the dark power was completely sealed away. We had done it. Cheers erupted from the team. I collapsed onto the ground, my muscles aching and my breath coming in ragged gasps. Beside me, Murong Yao sank to the grass, exhausted but wearing a relieved smile. Peace returned to the world, though I knew it would be brief. Murong Yao and I spent the following weeks leading the reconstruction efforts. We watched as damaged buildings rose again, stone by stone, thanks to the combined efforts of supernatural beings. Life returned to the streets. People looked at us with gratitude in their eyes. It's because of you that we have our lives back, one citizen told me. I just smiled and shook my head. It's what we do. Protecting people is our responsibility. While I handled the logistics, Murong Yao organized volunteers to help those who had lost their homes in the chaos. Back at the academy, the atmosphere was electric. New students were training harder than ever, fueled by the stories of our battle. I'm going to be a hero just like Senior Lin Yuan, I overheard a young recruit say. I looked at those young faces and felt a surge of hope. The future belonged to them. We had to make sure the world stayed safe enough for them to grow. But Murong Yao and I weren't just resting on our laurels. We started discussing how to tighten the management of supernatural powers. We can't just wait for the next crisis to hit, I told her. We need to be proactive. She agreed. We worked on building a better system to ensure supernatural abilities served society rather than destroying it. It felt like a new era of prosperity was beginning. Yet, deep down, I knew the path of a guardian never truly ends. As long as a single threat remained, I wouldn't hesitate to stand up again. But under the surface of this newfound peace, a dark current was shifting. During a routine patrol, Murong Yao and I picked up a strange energy signature. It wasn't like anything we'd seen before. This feels wrong, I said, narrowing my eyes. It's like someone is running secret experiments. Murong Yao nodded. The frequency is shifting. It's getting stronger. They're deep into something. We followed the trail to an abandoned factory on the edge of the city. To a normal person, it looked empty and silent. But my senses were screaming. Careful, I whispered. There's something inside. We slipped through the rusted doors. The air inside was thick with a stinging chemical stench. Strange pipes and glowing monitors lined the walls. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps echoed through the hall. We ducked behind a massive piece of machinery. A group of men walked past. One of them grumbled, "The effect of this batch isn't stable enough yet. We need to speed up the refinement. Are they making illegal power-enhancing potions?" Morong Yao breathed. I signaled her to stay quiet. We followed them into a hidden laboratory filled with rows of vials and stacks of data. If these drugs hit the black market, the world would descend into chaos. Users would lose control. Just as I was about to move, my foot caught a loose metal plate. It clattered against the floor. "Who's there?" a voice barked. We were exposed. There was no point in hiding anymore. We burst from the shadows. I didn't hold back. I unleashed my power, sending the first wave of guards flying. Morong Yao followed up, raising a barrier of elemental energy to shield us from their counterattack. "You won't stop the plan," one of them screamed. "Your illegal operation ends today," I snapped. They fought back with their own supernatural abilities, but they were no match for our coordination. As I fought, I noticed something strange about one of the attackers. His energy was erratic, flickering like a dying flame. He had clearly taken one of the prototype potions. It was eating him alive from the inside. "We have to shut this down now," I shouted over the noise. "We still don't know how big their operation is." Morong Yao yelled back. In the confusion, one of the scientists slammed his hand onto a red button. An alarm blared through the factory. "Reinforcements," I muttered. Sure enough, a second wave of enemies poured into the room. The odds were stacked against us, but we didn't flinch. We fought through the swarm until every last one of them was pinned to the floor. "Tie them up," I ordered. "I want answers." But when we started the interrogation, they wouldn't budge. They stared at us with cold, defiant eyes. "They're being controlled by someone bigger," Morong Yao said, looking at the equipment. I spent the next hour gathering evidence. We found crates of finished potions and enough machinery to supply an army. We needed to destroy it all, but first, we needed to know who was behind it. Just as we were preparing to leave, a massive wave of energy washed over the area. It came from the distance, heavy and suffocating. My blood ran cold. We hauled the prisoners and the evidence back to the academy and reported everything to the elders. The discovery was massive. If these potions hit the streets, it would be a massacre. During a second round of questioning, I caught one of the prisoners flinching. Morong Yao leaned in close, her voice like ice. "Tell us the truth, or you'll wish you had." The man finally broke. "We're just foot soldiers. The one in charge, he's called the Shadow Master." The name meant nothing to me. I had never heard of a Shadow Master. "He's powerful," the prisoner stammered. "He has terrifying abilities. He's been planning this for a long time." Morong Yao and I traded a look. This was bigger than a few illegal drugs. Meanwhile, the investigators found that the raw materials for the potions were coming from black market channels linked to several underground organizations. The web was getting more tangled by the second. We couldn't wait for them to come to us. We had to find this Shadow Master ourselves. We headed out into the city, moving toward the places where the outcasts and the lawless gathered, searching for any lead that would take us into the heart of the darkness. We hit the streets, hoping to find a lead in the city's darkest corners. In a cramped, lightless alley, we found a mysterious old man. He looked at us with eyes that had seen too much. "You're looking for the Shadow Master," he said. "That isn't a path you walk easily." I stepped forward, my voice urgent. "You know something about him?" The old man stayed silent for a moment before speaking slowly. "The Shadow Master is a dangerous man. He's obsessed with a power that can control every supernatural being on Earth." Morong Yao and I shared a look of pure dread. This was exactly what we feared. "Where is he?" Morong Yao asked. The old man shook his head. "I don't know his exact location, but I can give you a hint. Seek out the Lost Realm. The answers you want are buried there." We thanked him and immediately began preparing. We couldn't afford to wait. The journey to the Lost Realm was grueling. It was a place of legends, filled with unknown horrors. We hacked through dense, suffocating forests and scaled jagged mountain peaks. Finally, we reached the entrance. A thick, heavy mist swallowed everything in sight. "Be careful," Morong Yao warned. We don't know what's waiting in there. I nodded, and we stepped into the fog. A crushing weight immediately pressed down on us. It was a physical force, a wall of energy trying to shove us back. This pressure, it's trying to keep us out. Morong Yao gritted her teeth. Keep moving, I said, taking a deep breath. We have to see what's inside. As we struggled forward, the air cleared. The landscape was alien. Strange, glowing plants grew between ancient, crumbling ruins. The atmosphere felt heavy with secrets. Suddenly, the ground shook. A massive supernatural beast lunged from the shadows, its claws bared and teeth gnashing. We didn't hesitate. We unleashed our powers, the air exploding with energy as we clashed with the creature. It was incredibly strong, forcing us to use every trick we knew. After a desperate struggle, we finally brought it down. This place is as lethal as they say, Morong Yao panted. We pushed deeper into the ruins and found strange symbols etched into the stone. I knelt to examine them. These might be clues. A chilling laugh echoed through the ruins, stopping us cold. Haha, you actually dared to break in here. A dark figure materialized before us. I raised my hands, ready for a fight. Who are you? I am the Guardian, the figure sneered. You're here for the Shadow Master, aren't you? That's right, I said. Tell us where he is. If you want the answer, you have to pass my test. Without another word, the Guardian launched a wave of terrifying energy. We were thrown back into battle. His power was bizarre and overwhelming. Morong Yao tried to pin him down with elemental strikes, but he moved like a ghost, dodging every hit. You're too weak, he mocked. I bit my lip and focused. I channeled everything I had into a single, blinding beam of light. The Guardian simply tilted his head, letting the blast whistle past him. He countered with a shockwave that sent me flying into a stone wall. Lin Yuan, Morong Yao screamed. I scrambled up, my vision swimming, but my resolve was hardening. Don't worry, I'm not quitting. We locked eyes and nodded. We had to move together. We combined our powers, fusing my energy with her elemental force into a single, massive torrent. The Guardian's eyes widened in surprise. He wasn't laughing anymore. Our combined power collided with his in a deafening explosion. The shockwave tossed us back several feet. This isn't working, Morong Yao whispered. We need to find a weakness. I watched him closely as he reset for another attack. I noticed a slight lag in his movements, a tiny gap in his defense on the right side every time he lunged. Morong Yao, aim for his right. I yelled. She didn't miss a beat. She flooded the area with elemental energy while I poured my power into a pinpoint strike at his flank. He was too slow to react. Our attack connected squarely, sending him crashing into the dirt. We did it. I breathed, my heart racing. The Guardian clutched his side, coughing. Impressive. You passed. Now, I said, stepping closer. Tell me about the Shadow Master. He is in the heart of the Lost Realm, the Guardian wheezed. There is an ancient castle. He's inside. But be warned, the castle is crawling with traps and elite guards. We left him there and pressed on toward the castle. The further we went, the more oppressive the air became. It felt like the shadows themselves were watching us. I have a bad feeling about this, Morong Yao whispered. Me too, I said, my fist tightening. But we're not turning back. The castle gates were surrounded by glowing magical runes carved into the ground. A single wrong step would be fatal. As we tried to figure out a path, the massive doors creaked open. Guards, I shouted. A swarm of dark figures rushed out. Their powers were unlike anything I'd seen. Some could turn invisible, while others breathed clouds of lethal toxins. During the chaos, my foot slipped. I stepped on a rune. A massive bolt of electricity surged through my body. I collapsed, my muscles seizing as the current fried my nerves. Lin Yuan, Morong Yao cried out, rushing to my side. Ignore me. I gasped, my body shaking uncontrollably. Finish the guards. She gritted her teeth and unleashed a devastating elemental storm, clearing the area around us. By the time the last guard fell, the electricity had faded enough for me to stand. We were battered and bruised, but the path was clear. We stepped into the castle. It smelled of decay and dark magic. Torches flickered with an eerie, green light on the walls. As we walked down the main hall, a low, rumbling laugh filled the space. You finally arrived. The voice echoed off the high ceilings. A figure stepped out of the darkness. He wore a hideous, bone-white mask, and the energy radiating off him was cold enough to stop my heart. "The Shadow Master," I said. He looked at us, his presence filling the room like a physical weight. "It's me. Did you really think you could stop my plan?" "Your plan ends today," Murong Yao declared. The Shadow Master let out a cold, sharp laugh. "With just the two of you? How naive." He raised his hand, and the darkness in the room began to scream. The Shadow Master didn't wait. He lunged at us with a burst of dark energy. Murong Yao and I combined our strengths to block the strike, but the sheer force of his power was overwhelming. He was faster and stronger than anything we had faced before. Every time we tried to counter, he pushed us further back. We were losing ground, and I knew we couldn't keep this up for long. "This isn't working," I shouted over the roar of clashing energy. "We have to find a weakness." Murong Yao nodded, her eyes darting across the room as she deflected another shadow bolt. She watched his every move, tracking the flow of his dark aura. Suddenly, her expression changed. "Lin Yuan, every time he uses a major attack, there's a tiny pause," she yelled. "Hit him during the gap." I understood immediately. I waited, tensing my muscles as the Shadow Master gathered a massive ball of darkness. He unleashed it, and for a split second, his posture slumped. I didn't hesitate. I lunged forward, pouring every ounce of my power into a single, devastating strike. The Shadow Master was caught off guard. The blow landed squarely, sending him stumbling back several steps. "Now!" Murong Yao cried. She unleashed her elemental forces, weaving them into my energy to create a combined assault. The Shadow Master groaned, his movements becoming sluggish as our powers tore through his defenses. He looked exhausted, his dark aura flickering like a dying candle. "You! How dare you!" he hissed, his voice trembling with rage. We didn't give him a second to breathe. This was the final battle. The Shadow Master let out a primal roar, and the air around him began to warp and twist. He was burning through his remaining life force for one last desperate stand. "Watch out," I warned. Murong Yao stepped beside me, her face set in grim determination. The Shadow Master threw a massive wave of black energy toward us, a tide of pure destruction. We grabbed each other's hands, merging our powers into a shimmering, unbreakable shield. The collision was deafening. A massive explosion rocked the entire castle, sending stones crumbling from the ceiling and dust filling the air. "Hold on," I screamed, digging my heels into the floor. Murong Yao gritted her teeth, sweat pouring down her face as she strained to maintain the barrier. Slowly, the tide began to turn. His power was fading, while our resolve stayed firm. With one final push, we reflected the dark energy back at its source. The wave hit the Shadow Master head-on. "No!" he shrieked, a sound of pure despair. He collapsed to the ground, his body dissolving into the shadows he had tried to control. It was over. Murong Yao and I slumped to the floor, our bodies aching and our energy spent. "It's finally finished," she whispered. The oppressive darkness in the hall began to lift. Pale sunlight broke through the high windows, chasing away the green torchlight. We had stopped the conspiracy and saved countless lives from the virus, but a heavy silence hung between us. We knew the road to true peace was still long. We left the Lost Realm behind and returned to the Supernatural Academy. The welcome was incredible. Students and teachers lined the halls, cheering our names as heroes. "You are the pride of this academy," the elders told us. I smiled and thanked them, but my mind was already on the future. I turned to Murong Yao. "We solved this crisis, but we can't let our guard down." She agreed. We couldn't just be warriors anymore. We had to be leaders. In the following months, we threw ourselves into teaching. We shared our experiences with the new students, hoping to raise a generation of supernatural users who valued justice over power. We helped draft new laws to ensure our abilities were used for protection, not destruction. "Our power should be a shield for the world," Murong Yao said during a council meeting, "not a source of fear." Between classes, we took on missions to settle disputes. Once, we found a young boy whose powers were wildly out of control, causing chaos in his village. "Don't be afraid," I told him, kneeling down to his level. "We'll help you master this." Under our guidance, he learned to control his gift and eventually joined the academy. Our names became symbols of hope throughout the supernatural world. We were famous, but we remained vigilant. The academy changed under our influence. We optimized the curriculum, focusing on teamwork and real-world practice. We even opened a new research center to study the evolution of supernatural abilities. I want this place to be the front line of discovery, I told the staff. We hosted international exchanges, inviting masters from all over the world. During one event, a traveler showed us a unique technique for energy manipulation that left us all stunned. It was a golden age for the academy, but success always breeds envy. Rumors started to spread. Malicious lies about our true intentions began circulating in the shadows, whispered by rivals who hated our rising influence. Someone is doing this on purpose, Morong Yao said, showing me a smear report. I frowned. We won't let them win. We'll show them the truth. We tracked the source of the rumors and cleared our names through action and transparency. The Academy's reputation emerged stronger than ever, but it was a reminder that enemies don't always carry swords. One afternoon, a mysterious visitor arrived at the Academy gates. He was draped in a heavy black cloak that hid his face completely. I need to see Lin Yuan and Murong Yao, he said. His voice was raspy, carrying a weight that made the guards nervous. When we met him in the drawing room, he stood by the window, his back to us. Why are you here? I asked. The man turned slowly and pulled back his hood. His face was weathered, his eyes deep and filled with a haunted intelligence. I bring a warning, he said. The supernatural world is facing a crisis far greater than the one you just stopped. My stomach dropped. Morong Yao stepped forward. What crisis? Tell us everything. The visitor took a deep breath. In the far reaches of the dark lands, an ancient and evil force is waking up. If it is fully released, it will bring total destruction to everything we know. I frowned, my mind racing as I processed the visitor's words. What is the source of this power? I asked. And how do we stop it? The visitor shook his head slowly. I don't know its exact origin, but I know it has been gathering strength for a long time. Now, it's about to break its seal. You two are the only ones who can stop this catastrophe. Morong Yao looked confused. Why us? The visitor looked at us with a steady, unwavering gaze. Because your courage, wisdom, and strength have been proven in your past battles. More importantly, you have hearts of justice and kindness. I thought about it for a moment. We couldn't just ignore a threat like this. Can you give us any clues? Any help at all? The visitor reached into his cloak and pulled out a yellowed, ancient book. This is a record of that evil power I've collected over the years. I hope it helps you. I took the book and flipped through the fragile pages. Morong Yao leaned in, her eyes scanning the text. Thank you for the warning, she said to the man. But this sounds unbelievable. We need time to verify this and prepare. The visitor nodded. Time is short. You must act quickly. Remember, the fate of the entire supernatural world is in your hands. With that, he pulled his hood back up and vanished into the shadows. Morong Yao and I watched him leave, feeling a heavy weight settle in our chests. We didn't waste a second. We took the ancient book back to my office and started studying it immediately. The paper was incredibly brittle, and the text was written in an obscure, ancient language filled with mysterious symbols and diagrams. This looks like a dead language, Morong Yao noted. We have to decode it first. I agreed. We spent the next several days and nights buried in research, consulting linguistics experts from the academy. Finally, we managed to crack the code. The book detailed the origins and characteristics of the evil force. It says here that this power comes from a cursed supernatural family, I said, pointing to a passage. They performed forbidden rituals in a quest for infinite power. Instead, they unleashed this evil. I frowned, looking for a solution. Does it say how to restrain it? Morong Yao flipped the page. It mentions 3 mysterious artifacts. They are hidden in 3 different, highly dangerous locations. I looked at her. It looks like we're heading out on another adventure. But these places will be crawling with unknown dangers, Morong Yao said, her voice laced with concern. We need to be fully prepared. We began drafting a detailed plan and gathering supplies. I also handpicked a team of elite students from the academy to join us. Before we left, I stood before the team. This mission is going to be brutal, I told them. Be mentally prepared for anything. The team didn't flinch. We'll follow you and Professor Morong anywhere to protect our world, they replied. With everything ready, we set off toward the location of the first artifact. Our journey took us into a dense, suffocating forest. Fog hung heavy in the air, making it hard to see more than a few feet ahead. The ground was slick and treacherous. Stay sharp, I warned. There could be traps. The words had barely left my mouth when a student accidentally tripped a hidden wire. Dozens of poisoned arrows hissed through the air from the trees above. I reacted instantly, throwing up a supernatural shield. The arrows clattered harmlessly against the shimmering barrier. Thank you, Teacher Lin. The student gasped, his face pale. Stay close, Morong Yao commanded. No one wanders off. We pushed deeper until a low, guttural roar echoed through the trees. A massive beast covered in jagged spikes lunged at us from the brush. It was a supernatural mutation, and it looked hungry. Morong Yao and I charged forward without hesitation. The battle was intense. The beast was incredibly strong, but the students backed us up with their own abilities. After a grueling fight, I spotted a gap in its armor. We struck its weak point and brought the creature down. The artifact should be close, I said, wiping sweat from my brow. After a bit more searching, we found a hidden cave. Inside, the first artifact sat waiting. But getting to it wasn't easy. We had to bypass a series of magical barriers and complex riddles. Morong Yao used her brilliance to solve the puzzles, and finally, the artifact was in our hands. The team cheered, but the celebration was short. We still had 2 more to find. Next, we traveled to a vast, scorching desert. The sun was a hammer, and the sand felt like it was boiling. Keep drinking water, Morong Yao urged the team. Don't let your strength fail. The heat was bad, but the weather was worse. A massive sandstorm rolled in, turning the world into a howling wall of grit. I could barely see my own hand. Hold hands, I shouted over the wind. Don't get separated. Despite our efforts, one student was swept away and buried under the shifting dunes. Morong Yao and I dug frantically, our hands raw, until we finally pulled him out. When the storm passed, we realized we were lost. We wandered for hours in the trackless waste. We can't keep going like this, I said, looking at our dwindling supplies. Morong Yao studied the horizon and the position of the stars. Eventually, she found our bearings. We pushed on until we stumbled upon an ancient ruin. The second artifact must be in there, she said. The ruins were a death trap of pressure plates and hidden vents. During the exploration, a student was struck by a poison dart. Morong Yao treated him immediately. Hang on, she whispered. We're almost there. We found the second artifact deep within the ruins. But our victory was hollow. We were almost out of food and water. We had to get out of that desert fast. There was no time to rest. We headed straight for a mountain range that pierced the clouds. The final artifact was hidden at the peak of a frozen summit. The cold was bone-chilling, and the wind threatened to blow us off the narrow ledges. Watch your step on the ice, I warned the team. The mountain fought us every step of the way. Multiple avalanches nearly wiped us out. During one particularly violent slide, several team members were swept down the slope. Morong Yao and I dove into the snow, digging them out one by one before they suffocated. We can't stop, Morong Yao said, her breath hitching in the thin air. We have to find it. As we climbed higher, the air grew thin, and the team's exhaustion reached its limit. Only sheer willpower kept us moving. Finally, we reached the summit and secured the third artifact. But just as we prepared to descend, a massive blizzard slammed into the peak. Find cover, I yelled. We scrambled into a nearby cave, but the storm showed no signs of letting up. The temperature was dropping fast. If we stay trapped here, we're dead, one of the students said, shivering violently. I looked at the 3 artifacts in our possession, then out at the white void outside. I had to find a way out. We hadn't come this far to freeze to death. We have to find a way to break through this blizzard, Morong Yao said, her voice barely audible over the howling wind. If we combine our powers to form a protective shield, we might stand a chance. I nodded, my face numb from the frost. On my command, the team unleashed their energy. Guided by Morong Yao and me, we pushed forward. We fought the mountain step by agonizing step, leaning into the gale as we descended. It took every ounce of strength we had, but we made it. We finally returned to the Supernatural Academy with the 3 mysterious artifacts. There was no time to celebrate. We immediately began researching how to use them against the ancient evil that was stirring. These 3 pieces, their energy pulses are echoing off each other, Morong Yao observed. I closed my eyes. I reached out with my mind, feeling the raw, ancient power humming within the relics. We need to find a way to fuse them, I said. It took dozens of failed experiments and grueling trials. Finally, we found the key. As the powers merged, a blinding pillar of light erupted in the lab. The energy was staggering. My team stood back in awe, but the moment of triumph didn't last. The Academy's alarms began to blare. A piercing, soul-chilling sound. It's too late, I said, grabbing the fused artifact. The evil has awakened early. We didn't hesitate. We raced toward the source of the dark energy. When we arrived, the city was unrecognizable. A thick, black fog choked the streets. Countless supernatural beings were being puppeteered by the darkness, their eyes vacant and wild. Get ready, I yelled. We used the artifacts to purify this mess. Morong Yao and the team signaled their readiness. We charged directly into the heart of the shadow. This was it, the final showdown. The dark force shifted, morphing into horrific, nightmare shapes that lunged at us from the gloom. We weren't afraid. Morong Yao and I led the charge, pushing the artifacts to their absolute limit. Light clashed with darkness. The impact sent shockwaves through the ground, cracking the pavement beneath our feet. Hold the line, I screamed over the roar of the explosion. My team gritted their teeth. They followed us into the fray, even as some were knocked back by the dark energy. Morong Yao's face was pale with worry. We had to suppress this power now, or everything would be lost. I narrowed my focus, pouring every drop of my willpower into the artifact. Slowly, the black tide began to recede. Now, give it everything. The light became blinding. With one final surge, the darkness was incinerated. The city fell silent. The possessed beings collapsed, their minds finally clear. We had won. I slumped to the ground, my body trembling with exhaustion. Beside me, Morong Yao sat down, a weak but relieved smile crossing her face. Peace didn't mean rest, though. The world was in ruins. Morong Yao and I shifted our focus to the reconstruction. There were debris to clear, buildings to fix, and wounded souls to heal. I organized volunteer teams, leading them into the rubble. Keep going, everyone. I encouraged them. We're bringing this city back to life. Morong Yao spent her days at the hospital. She used her abilities to soothe the pain of the survivors. While the city rebuilt, we reflected on what had happened. We couldn't let a disaster like this strike again. We tightened our defenses and improved our management of the supernatural world. Slowly, prosperity returned. New students began enrolling at the academy. But Morong Yao and I wanted more than just survival. We wanted progress. We should push the boundaries of supernatural technology, I told her one evening. Make life better for everyone, not just for combat. She agreed. We started building research centers and pushing for ethical education among supernatural users. We wanted to foster a sense of responsibility. Under our guidance, technology flourished and society stabilized. This is just the beginning, I said, looking out over the glowing skyline. Let's welcome this new journey together. Morong Yao took my hand and smiled. We will. The breakthrough came sooner than expected. Our research labs were working day and night to merge supernatural energy with modern science. I visited a high-tech facility where scientists were testing a massive energy converter. It was designed to provide limitless power. Watch the data, the lead scientist shouted. Start the core. The machine hummed to life. Light flickered, and a massive wave of energy surged through the room. But then, the needles on the gauges hit the red zone. The air began to crackle with dangerous static. It's losing stability, someone screamed. I moved before I could think. I lunged forward, channeling my own energy into the device to anchor the fluctuating core. Don't panic, I barked. Check the systems. Find the flaw. After a tense few minutes, we found it, a design defect in a key component. Morong Yao joined me, her eyes sharp. We have to redesign this part immediately. The team worked for days without sleep. When we restarted the device with the new parts, it worked perfectly. The efficiency was off the charts. Cheers erupted in the lab. This was a revolution. The city grew brighter, transportation became faster, and life became easier for everyone. But as I looked at the humming machine, I knew our work wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The applications for supernatural technology were endless. After stabilizing the energy grid, I realized we could do more. Much more. My eyes turned toward the field of medicine. At the Supernatural Academy's affiliated hospital, a groundbreaking surgery was about to begin. The patient was terminal. Traditional medicine had already given up on him. Morong Yao and I decided it was time to see if our technology could save a life where science had failed. Inside the operating room, the atmosphere was heavy. Doctors moved with frantic precision. Morong Yao focused her elemental powers, using them to guide the surgical instruments with sub-millimeter accuracy. I stood nearby, using my supernatural perception to scan the patient's body. I could see the diseased cells clearly, like dark spots on a map. The malignant cells are spreading. I warned, my voice steady despite the tension. Prepare to inject the restoration fluid. A nurse quickly administered a glowing liquid into the patient's fore. It was a cocktail of medical compounds and pure supernatural energy designed to rebuild damaged tissue at a cellular level. The procedure was grueling. Every step felt like walking a tightrope. But Morong Yao and I stayed locked in, refusing to let our focus slip. After hours of intense work, the monitors finally stabilized. The surgery was a success. The patient's condition was under control, and his body began the slow process of recovery. News of the miracle spread like wildfire. Suddenly, patients from all over were clamoring for treatment. To keep up with the demand, Morong Yao and I formed a dedicated research team. We poured our resources into developing new tech. We created a spray that could seal deep wounds in seconds and supernatural therapies for mental illnesses that were previously untreatable. Hope was returning to the people. But as with all great leaps forward, new problems began to crawl out of the shadows. Ethics and morality became the new battlefield. As supernatural medicine went mainstream, people started asking hard questions. The treatments were expensive. Social activists began to protest, claiming that we were creating a world where only the rich could afford to live. We can't let this become an exclusive club for the wealthy, one activist shouted during a public forum. We need a fair solution. Then there were the medical experts who feared the long-term effects. They worried that pumping energy into the human body might alter our very genetic structure. They called for strict regulations and safety assessments. Morong Yao and I knew we couldn't ignore them. We organized a series of seminars, inviting experts from every field to voice their concerns. The debates were heated. Scientists argued that we couldn't stop progress out of fear. Ethicists fired back, warning against blind advancement. I stood up to quiet the room. Everyone's voice matters here, I said. We have to find the balance between progress and morality. Morong Yao stepped up beside me. We will increase our research and draft regulations to ensure this technology develops safely. After weeks of negotiation, we reached a compromise. We established a regulatory body to oversee every new treatment. We also set up a fund to help impoverished patients, ensuring that the benefits of our work reached everyone, not just those with deep pockets. But solving the ethical crisis didn't bring peace. Instead, it triggered a war for resources. The rapid growth of supernatural tech created a massive demand for rare ores and materials. In a remote mining district, two rival factions finally snapped. They went to war over a single high-energy crystal. "We found this vein first," one leader screamed. "Strength decides who owns it," the other roared back. By the time Morong Yao and I arrived, the scene was pure chaos. Supernatural energy was exploding everywhere as the two groups tore into each other. "Stop, all of you," I barked. My voice echoed across the valley, forced into their ears with a surge of power. They froze. Morong Yao looked at the destruction with a disgusted expression. "Is a single rock worth killing each other over? We should be developing these resources together." Neither side wanted to budge. They both felt entitled to the prize. I took a breath, trying to find a way out of the deadlock. We're forming a resource allocation committee, I proposed. We'll distribute materials based on actual need and contribution. It'll be fair. Some people nodded. Others looked skeptical. Who's to say you won't play favorites? Someone shouted. I'll personally guarantee the fairness, I said firmly. And you can all monitor the process. The committee was formed, but the reality was messy. Some factions tried to use bribes and threats to get a bigger slice of the pie. Even within the committee, arguments broke out daily. The pressure on Murong Yao and me was becoming suffocating. Internal rifts began to tear at the fabric of our society. One side wanted to prioritize city building and high-tech defense. The other side insisted that we focus on basic services and the quality of life for the common person. During one major meeting, the shouting got so bad I thought the roof might come down. City development is the priority, an official yelled. Without tech, we can't face future threats. And if the people are miserable, the society will collapse from within, a sociologist countered. Murong Yao and me watched from the stage, our hearts heavy. After the meeting, we decided to divide and conquer. I went to speak with the city developers, listening to their fears while explaining that a city is nothing without happy citizens. Murong Yao met with the social advocates, showing them how technological leaps would eventually make life easier for everyone in the long run. Slowly, the walls started to come down. They realized their goals weren't mutually exclusive. At the next General Assembly, we finally reached a consensus. We drafted a plan that balanced urban growth with social welfare. For a moment, it felt like the supernatural world was finally united. But just as we caught our breath, a new shadow began to stretch across the horizon. On the fringes of our territory, a mysterious organization was rising. They were secretive, their goals unknown, but their movements were coordinated and fast. Intelligence reports started hitting my desk. Something was coming. And this time, it was watching us from the dark. This organization was moving in the shadows, secretly collecting powerful supernatural weapons and recruiting gifted individuals. What were they actually planning? I frowned, staring at the reports on my desk. Murong Yao stood beside me, her expression grim. She told me that regardless of their goals, we couldn't afford to let our guard down. To get to the bottom of this, she and I handpicked an elite squad for a scouting mission. We sent them deep into enemy territory to gather intelligence. But things went wrong fast. The mysterious organization was prepared for us. They had rigged the area with lethal traps and magical barriers. Watch out. It's an ambush, one of the team members screamed. It was too late. A barrage of supernatural attacks slammed into them. My team was trapped. Murong Yao and I didn't hesitate. We headed out immediately to rescue them. We unleashed our full power, crashing into the enemy ranks like a storm. The battle was fierce, but we eventually pushed them back and pulled our people out of the death trap. The encounter left me shaken. These guys weren't just common thugs. Their strength was terrifying. I told Murong Yao that we had to uncover their master plan immediately, or the consequences would be unthinkable. She nodded in silent agreement. They were hidden too deep. Just as we were trying to figure out our next move, more bad news arrived. A crisis was spreading. Across multiple regions, supernatural beings were losing control of their powers. It was chaos. People were getting hurt, and the public was spiraling into a panic. I wondered why this was happening all at once. Murong Yao suspected the mystery organization was behind it. I agreed. They were likely conducting experiments that were warping the very fabric of our energy. We quickly assembled a team of experts to find a solution. We tightened monitoring and management of all supernatural users to prevent more accidents. But the situation only got worse. The outbreaks were expanding. We have to find the source, I said, my heart racing with anxiety. Or the entire world will fall into madness. Murong Yao suggested we examine the victims directly. We started a detailed analysis of those who had lost control. After hours of grueling work, we found a common thread. Every single victim had a strange energy fluctuation in their bodies. It was an external interference. This has to be their handiwork, I muttered. Before we could investigate further, the enemy decided to come to us. The leader of the organization showed up right at the gates of the Supernatural Academy. He didn't come alone. He brought a small army of powerful subordinates. It was a blatant provocation. Your so-called peace and order is nothing but a joke to me, the leader sneered. I glared at him, my blood boiling. I demanded to know why he was destroying the balance of our world. This world needs a new order, he replied coldly. And I will be its creator. Morong Yao stepped forward, telling him he was dreaming. We weren't going to let him win. The leader just laughed. He claimed he had mastered the ultimate power to control all supernatural energy. Then, he turned and walked away, leaving us with a chilling threat. We knew a massive war was inevitable. I immediately called for a gathering of every supernatural being we could find. We had to prepare. I told the crowd that this would be a hard fight, but for the sake of justice and peace, we would never back down. Morong Yao rallied their spirits, reminding everyone that unity was our greatest strength. The atmosphere in the supernatural world turned heavy and tense. While we trained, the enemy was busy in the dark, finalizing their plans for our destruction. Morong Yao and I spent day and night refining our strategies. We needed every advantage. On the academy training grounds, I personally coached the fighters on how to channel their energy into weapons. Morong Yao focused on team coordination. Concentrate, I shouted over the sounds of training. Feel the flow inside you. Turn it into your strongest blade. They were exhausted, covered in sweat, but their eyes stayed sharp. Morong Yao ran combat simulations, pushing them to trust one another. She kept reminding them that the power of a team is infinite. Meanwhile, we dug into the enemy's weaknesses. By analyzing the intelligence we had gathered, we noticed something interesting. Despite their high-tech weapons, the organization was fractured. There was internal conflict and infighting among their ranks. We can use this, I told Morong Yao. She agreed. If we could trigger those internal tensions during the heat of battle, they would crumble from within. We packed every piece of gear we had, from the latest energy shields to experimental attack modules. I knew these tools would help, but the final victory would come down to our courage and our wits. Finally, the moment arrived. The day of the final battle. Morong Yao and I led our forces onto a vast, open plain. The two armies collided with a roar that shook the earth. Blasts of supernatural light lit up the sky. I charged in first, my powers tearing through the enemy front lines. Move forward. For peace, I yelled, my voice echoing over the screams and explosions. From the rear, Morong Yao commanded the battlefield, using her elemental powers to shield our allies and provide cover fire. The enemy leader wasn't backing down, though. He unleashed a horrific power that made the ground tremble and turned the sky a sickly hue. Today is your end, he roared. But my people didn't flinch. They fought harder. As the battle raged, I saw the cracks in the enemy's formation. Some of their members started questioning their leader's suicidal orders. They hesitated. Now, this is our chance, I shouted. I led a strike team directly into the heart of their confusion, causing their ranks to shatter. Morong Yao coordinated the frontal assault, pinning them down. After a brutal, bloody struggle, the organization began to retreat. Don't let them escape, I commanded. We hunted them down until the organization was completely dismantled. In a final, desperate stand, Morong Yao and I worked together to take down their leader. You won't be winners forever, he spat, pinned to the ground. Maybe not, I replied firmly. But justice never fails. With their leader captured and their forces destroyed, the shadow that had loomed over us finally began to fade. The smoke of war finally cleared. Peace, a stranger we hadn't seen in a long time, returned to the supernatural world. Cities began to rise from the rubble, and life slowly drifted back to normal. Morong Yao and I were hailed as heroes, our names etched into the hearts of the people. But I didn't care about the medals or the fame. There was still work to do. We spent our days at the Supernatural Academy. New classes and research projects were popping up everywhere, all designed to train the next generation. I wanted to make sure every gifted person could reach their full potential. During an academy meeting, I told them plainly that we had to use our powers to create value for society, not just for fighting. Morong Yao was just as busy. She threw herself into urban planning, using her elemental powers to make the cities more beautiful and livable. She wanted a world full of innovation where people could actually be happy. We even started reaching out to other worlds, sharing our technology and culture. I knew we couldn't thrive in isolation. We had to grow together. Under our leadership, a new era began. People looked to the future with hope. But deep down, Morong Yao and I knew our mission wasn't over. As long as a single threat to peace existed, we would be there to stand against it. That threat arrived sooner than expected. Just as things were looking up, a mysterious force from an unknown realm began to warp the balance of our world. Some supernatural beings reported strange fluctuations. One moment their powers were uncontrollably strong, the next, they were gone. One man told me his abilities had never acted like this before. He was terrified. Morong Yao and I investigated immediately. We traced the source to a massive rift in space-time, far out in the distance. She guessed it might be an infiltration from another world. I frowned, staring at the tear in reality. It was possible, but we knew nothing about what lay on the other side. I put together an elite expedition team of experienced fighters. We packed the most advanced gear we had and stepped into the unknown. Inside the rift, everything was wrong. The physics were twisted and strange. Dangerous creatures lurked in the shadows. One of my team members shouted a warning just as a beast lunged. We fought them off with sheer will and precision. We pushed deeper until we found it, a massive energy source pulsing at the core of the rift. This was the heart of the problem. Our captain told us we had to shut it down or the consequences would be catastrophic. But it wasn't going to be easy. The thing was protected by a series of complex puzzles and shifting laws of physics. We stood before the energy source, bathed in an eerie, flickering light. The air felt heavy, charged with a power that defied logic. One of my guys whispered about how many secrets this thing must hold. I watched the structure closely, my brow furrowed. I told the team to stay sharp. The laws of space here weren't the ones we grew up with. Morong Yao tried to pulse her elemental energy to scan the core, but she was thrown back by a massive surge. The power was too dense for her to penetrate. Our captain checked the readings on his equipment. The frequency was jumping all over the place with no pattern. Suddenly, the core released a violent pulse. Several team members were sent flying. I shouted for everyone to hold their ground and threw up a supernatural shield to block the next wave. Morong Yao rushed to check the injured. Luckily, they were just bruised, but we were running out of time. One of our spatial specialists suggested we look at the ripples in the air. We started studying the space-time fluctuations and noticed a subtle link between the ripples and the flickering light of the core. It was a code. We spent hours recording the patterns, analyzing every flash. Finally, one of my teammates yelled out. He'd found a rhythm. We adjusted our energy frequencies to match the core. For a second, it worked. The light dimmed. We were in sync. I told everyone to hold it right there. But just as we thought we had it, the core didn't just resist. It exploded with a force 10 times stronger than before. We were all blasted back. Morong Yao hit the ground hard, her face pale with shock. I scrambled up, staring at the pulsing light. We hadn't found the real key yet. Just as despair started to set in, a new thought hit me. I realized this energy source might not be purely mechanical or physical. It felt alive. I told the team that this thing might be reacting to our emotions and our will. They looked at me like I was crazy, but we had nothing left to lose. I told everyone to close their eyes. I told them to focus on our mission, our responsibility, and our desire for a peaceful world. Morong Yao was the first to lock in. Her elemental energy began to flow softly, creating a tiny, rhythmic resonance with the core. It was working. I cheered them on, and the whole team began to pour their hearts and their resolve into their power. The light from the core changed again, turning softer, matching our intent. We were on the right track. But then, the space around us began to scream. The rift started twisting violently, and a crushing pressure filled the air, making it hard to breathe. I yelled for them to hold on. We gritted our teeth, fighting to keep our emotions steady as the pressure threatened to crush our bones. Several of my team members were pushing past their absolute limits. One of them stumbled, her voice barely a whisper as she gasped, I can't go on. I rushed over to support her, gritting my teeth. Just a little longer, I urged. We're almost there. Just as we reached the breaking point, the energy core erupted in a blinding flash of white light. Then, total silence. Everything went still. We opened our eyes to find the core had stopped spinning. It was dead. We did it, someone shouted. A cheer went up, but it was cut short. The space around us began to warp. The rift was becoming unstable, threatening to swallow us whole. Move. Now, I yelled. We didn't hesitate. Everyone pushed their powers to the max, racing toward the exit. We lunged through the collapsing portal at the very last second, tumbling back into our own world. We were exhausted, drained of every drop of energy, but the sense of achievement was overwhelming. However, peace was a luxury we didn't have. Even though the core was shut down, the supernatural world didn't return to normal. A mysterious energy aftershock began to ripple across the globe, triggering chaos. In the cities, power grids flickered and died. Traffic lights went haywire, causing massive pileups. People were panicking in the streets, demanding to know what was happening. Murong Yao and I launched an immediate investigation. We discovered that this energy ripple was messing with the stability of supernatural abilities. Some people found their powers impossible to control. Others were suffering from violent backlashes where their own energy turned against them. We have to find a solution fast, I said, looking at the reports, or the fallout will be catastrophic. We gathered every expert and scholar we could find. In the labs, they worked around the clock. Finally, one expert approached us with a grim face. The aftershock is interfering with brain waves. That's why everyone is losing control. Murong Yao frowned. Is there any way to block it? After endless trials, they found a specific material that could resist the interference. I immediately ordered a mass production run to get it into the hands of every supernatural being we could reach. But as soon as one fire was out, another started. Criminals were using the chaos as a cover for a massive crime wave. These vultures, Murong Yao hissed, her eyes flashing with anger. We can't let them get away with this. I led our forces into the streets to restore order. During one raid, I went head-to-head with a powerful supernatural criminal. He lashed out with high-level energy blasts, but I stayed calm, dodging his strikes and waiting for a lapse in his guard. It was a brutal fight, but I eventually pinned him down and took him out of the play. Order was slowly returning, but Murong Yao and I knew we couldn't relax. Under the surface, new threats were brewing. Several underground organizations were seizing the opportunity to expand their influence, hungry for power and resources. Their movements are suspicious, Murong Yao warned. We need to watch them closely. I nodded. They're waiting for us to slip up so they can deliver a killing blow. We sent out our best spies. The intel they brought back was chilling. These groups were developing a new type of supernatural weapon. It was designed to be so powerful it would shatter the current balance of power forever. We have to beat them to it, I said. We need a countermeasure. At the same time, public opinion was turning against us. People were scared and frustrated that the world was still a mess. Rumors started spreading that we were incompetent. Murong Yao felt the sting of the criticism deeply. We're doing everything we can, she whispered. Why don't they see that? Don't lose heart, I told her. We'll prove ourselves through our actions. We stepped up our communication with the public while pushing the scientists even harder. During one session, a researcher came up with a bold, dangerous idea. If we can harness the properties of the energy aftershock itself, we might be able to build a suppression weapon. It was a massive risk, but we had no choice. We gave the project our full support, but the road was paved with obstacles. The physics of the aftershock were incredibly complex. Experiments failed one after another. This is harder than we thought, a scientist muttered, staring at a screen full of errors. Don't quit now, I encouraged them. We'll find the breakthrough. While we fought the technical battle, our enemies moved. They sent spies into the lab to steal our research. Watch your backs, I warned the team. We might have a mole. The atmosphere grew thick with suspicion. During a critical test, a piece of equipment malfunctioned, nearly blowing the whole lab sky high. That wasn't an accident, Murong Yao said, her voice cold. We eventually caught the traitor, but the damage was done. The schedule was trashed, and the pressure was suffocating. We worked through the nights, fueled by pure adrenaline, until finally, a breakthrough. We got it, the lead scientist shouted. We found a way to control the aftershock. But before we could even celebrate, the alarm started screaming. The rival organizations had found us. They launched a massive, coordinated assault on the city. The sky lit up with the glow of 1,000 abilities, and the sounds of war filled the air. "Get ready to fight," I yelled, leading our fighters to the front lines. Morong Yao stayed back at the base to protect the research and the scientists. The enemy attack was relentless. I saw my friends falling around me. "Hang in there," I shouted, trying to rally the line, but we were being pushed back by sheer numbers. Suddenly, Morong Yao's voice crackled over the comms. "Lin Yuan, their rear flank is exposed. Hit them now." I didn't need to be told twice. I took a strike team and circled around, slamming into the enemy's back line. They weren't prepared for a pincer move. Their formation crumbled instantly. "Now, counterattack," I warned. Our morale surged. We drove them back with everything we had, finally forcing them into a full retreat. But as the dust settled, I looked out over the ruined streets of the city. My heart burned with a mix of fury and heavy responsibility. "I'm going to make those bastards pay for this," I promised. We all knew the truth. The enemy wouldn't just quit after one defeat. A bigger challenge was lurking right around the corner. As soon as the fighting stopped, Morong Yao and I threw ourselves into rebuilding the city. The streets were a mess of twisted metal and shattered concrete. People were everywhere, picking through the debris and trying to reclaim their lives. I organized the supernatural users into construction teams, using their abilities to speed up the repairs. Morong Yao took charge of the volunteers, providing medical aid and comfort to the wounded. "Keep going, everyone," I shouted, trying to keep spirits high. "We'll bring this city back to its former glory. I promise." But rebuilding wasn't enough. We needed a shield. Morong Yao and I overhauled the entire defense system. We couldn't let them catch us off guard again. We established massive energy barriers around the perimeter, increased the frequency of patrols, and started developing experimental defensive weapons. Then, we hit a wall. Resources were running dry. My logistics chief came to me, looking pale and anxious. "We're out of supplies, Lin Yuan. We can't finish the work like this." I had to make a call. I decided to reach out to other supernatural organizations in the region. Some of them had played dirty games with us in the past, but the world was at stake now. "We need to unite every force we can," I told my team. After some brutal negotiations, a few of those groups finally agreed to send aid. Slowly, the city began to breathe again. But Morong Yao and I both felt it. This was just the eye of the storm. While the world seemed stable, a new conspiracy was rotting beneath the surface. A mysterious figure had appeared in the shadows, backing our old enemies. He was feeding them advanced technology and tactical guidance. Our intelligence reports were chilling. The enemy leaders were getting cocky, bragging about how they were going to topple our leadership. We had a few blurry leads on this mystery man, but nothing concrete. "I don't care who he is," Morong Yao said, her eyes cold. "We aren't letting him win." We dug deeper, tightening our surveillance on the entire supernatural world. Then, a breakthrough happened by pure chance. I found a link between this mysterious figure and an ancient ruin. "The secrets we need are in there," I told her. We headed to the site immediately. The ruins were a death trap, filled with ancient mechanical triggers and powerful supernatural guardians. I kept my hand on my weapon the whole time. "Stay sharp," I whispered. We moved through the dust and shadows, inching closer to the truth. The walls were covered in ancient runes that seemed to pulse with history. Morong Yao studied them closely, while I used my energy to try and decode their meaning. Suddenly, a hidden door groaned open, spilling a strange light into the hall. Inside, a massive crystal ball floated in the air, surrounded by swirling energy. "That's it," I said, stepping forward. The moment we got close, the crystal lashed out. A wave of raw power slammed into us, throwing us back. Morong Yao scrambled up, gasping for air. "It's too strong." I didn't back down. I focused every ounce of my will, using my own power to push back against the crystal's aura. Slowly, the light softened. It was testing me. Then, images began to flicker inside the glass. The mystery man's face appeared, and the pieces of the puzzle finally clicked. "It's him," I muttered, stunned. It turned out the mastermind was a powerful exile who had been kicked out of the supernatural community years ago. He had been nursing a grudge ever since, planning to return and rule everything with an iron fist. "We have to stop him now," Morong Yao said. But as we turned to leave, the ruins began to shake. We had tripped a final trap. Massive boulders started raining down from the ceiling. "Run!" I yelled. We sprinted through the collapsing tunnels, dodging falling stone and snapping traps. We made it out alive, but we were drained, our energy nearly spent. Back at the city, I called an emergency meeting with all our allies. The room was tense. Everyone had an opinion. Some wanted to attack immediately, while others feared a trap. "We need more intel first," Morong Yao argued. "We need to know his next move." I nodded. "We'll send out elite scouts to shadow him. In the meantime, we train. Everyone." I personally led the training sessions at the academy. I pushed the recruits hard, sharing every trick and combat technique I knew. "Power isn't just about strength," I told them. "It's about the responsibility to protect." Morong Yao handled the mental side, making sure everyone's resolve stayed rock solid. Finally, the reports came in. We had the location. We had the plan. "It's time," I said. The night before the final battle, the air felt heavy. Morong Yao and I stood on a balcony overlooking the city. "No matter what happens," she said softly, "we fought for the right side." I looked at her and nodded. "We're going to win this." Down in the square, the fighters were gathered. Their eyes were bright with defiance. "We won't back down," someone shouted, and the cry was taken up by hundreds of voices. It shook the sky. In the command center, we went over the plan one last time. Every detail was polished. Every man knew his role. When the meeting ended, I went back to my room to get a few hours of rest. "Sleep well," Morong Yao told me. "Tomorrow is a new beginning." I closed my eyes, but my mind was already on the battlefield. When dawn finally broke, the sun spilled across the world like fire. The moment had arrived. I stepped out to the front of the line, Morong Yao by my side, and looked toward the horizon. It was time to end this. We marched toward the mysterious informant's stronghold. Along the way, the glow of supernatural energy flickered in the darkness. The air was thick and heavy. When we finally reached the base, the enemy was already there, waiting in formation. "Charge!" I warned. My team surged forward like a tidal wave. In an instant, the world exploded into chaos. Powers collided, creating massive shock waves and blinding flashes of light. I dove into the fray, my own energy surging through my veins. I struck down a group of enemies with a single, sweeping blow. I moved through the battlefield like a phantom, every strike landing with the force of a thunderbolt. Light erupted from my palms, illuminating the dark corners and sending a chill of fear through the enemy ranks. Morong Yao was right there with me, commanding the elements. She provided cover for our allies, weaving fire, frost, and lightning into a deadly dance of offense and defense. Her eyes were fixed and steady as she chanted, carving a path through the carnage for our fighters. "Keep going. Don't back down," she shouted. Her voice carried over the din of battle, fueling our resolve. On the far side of the field, one of our men took a direct hit. He collapsed, but his teammates didn't hesitate. They formed a circle around him immediately. "Hold on, brother," they urged, treating his wounds even as they fended off the next wave of attackers. "Watch your left," someone yelled, spotting a lethal ambush just in time. The battlefield was a mess of thick smoke and deafening explosions. Every one of us was fighting with everything we had. We weren't just fighting for survival, we were fighting for the world. I spotted the enemy's command center tucked away in the distance. "Follow me. We take out that post." I called out to my elite squad. The enemy saw us coming. They funneled troops in to block our path. "Don't let them through," their commander screamed. We didn't flinch. We threw ourselves into a desperate, bloody struggle. One of my teammates was hit and fell into a pool of blood. My vision turned red with rage. "For him. For the mission. Move," I bellowed. We broke through their line and stormed the command post. I unleashed my full power, obliterating every enemy inside in a single burst. We did it. "The command post is down," a team member cheered. But the fight wasn't over. The remaining enemies were still resisting with stubborn desperation. Nearby, Morong Yao had run into a high-level master. They were locked in a fierce duel of supernatural abilities. "You're no match for me," the enemy master mocked. Morong Yao gritted her teeth. "Try me." She pushed her elemental control to the absolute limit. Fire twisted in her hands. forming a massive dragon that roared toward her opponent. The master raised a powerful energy shield, absorbing the impact. They traded blows, neither giving an inch. Then, I saw it. The master left a tiny opening. Now, Morongyao hissed. She lunged, landing a fatal blow that sent the master crashing to the ground. Her teammates let out a roar of approval. Great job, Morongyao. In every corner of the battlefield, the struggle continued. Sweat and blood soaked the earth, but our conviction never wavered. We all shared the same thought. We will win. After hours of brutal combat, the enemy's lines finally began to crumble. They couldn't hold on any longer. They're breaking. Give it everything you've got, I shouted. Our morale skyrocketed as we launched the final charge. The first light of victory began to shine through the smoke. Morongyao and I led the pursuit, refusing to give the enemy a second to breathe. They scattered, trying to flee into the hills, but we were relentless. Don't let a single one escape, a fighter yelled, using his speed ability to run them down. I stayed in the center of the chaos, shouting orders. Split into squads. Hunt them down one by one. My team moved with precision, encircling the stragglers. Meanwhile, Morongyao led a group of healers across the field. She knelt beside a critically injured fighter, pouring her elemental energy into his body to stabilize him. Stay with me, she whispered. It's going to be okay. In a nearby valley, we cornered a large group of hostiles. Surrender, one of our men demanded. You have nowhere to go. They tried to fight back one last time, but I arrived and unleashed a crushing wave of energy that flattened their resistance. Drop your weapons, I said, my voice cold and heavy, or die where you stand. They finally realized it was over. One by one, they threw down their arms and raised their hands. Elsewhere, a scout found a secret warehouse filled to the brim with weapons and supplies. When Morongyao and I arrived to inspect it, she looked at the crates and sighed with relief. This will help us rebuild, she said. As the last of the resistance was neutralized, a deafening cheer erupted across the battlefield. Men and women embraced, weeping and laughing. We had won. But I knew the work was just beginning. Morongyao and I immediately started organizing the cleanup. We had to count the fallen and move the wounded to better facilities. You all did incredible work, I told the weary survivors. But we can't stop yet. We have to bring order back to this world. The smoke cleared, revealing the true cost of the war. The cities were ruins. Buildings had collapsed into piles of rubble, and the infrastructure was gone. I stood on a heap of debris with Morongyao, looking out over the devastation. This is our responsibility now, I said. We have to bring this place back to life. She nodded. And we will. We started with rescue teams, searching the ruins for the missing and providing aid to the survivors. Our healers worked day and night, refusing to give up on a single life. Our builders used their abilities to shore up structures and clear the streets. Everywhere I looked, people were working. They were tired, but they were hopeful. Keep it up, a builder called out to his crew. We'll have this city back in no time. As the reconstruction moved forward, Morongyao and I spent our nights reflecting on how we got here. We can't let this happen again, she said. We need better management, better defenses. I agreed. We needed early warning systems and better training for the next generation of supernatural beings. We held meetings with representatives from every faction, mapping out a future based on peace instead of power struggles. We're going to make this world better, I told the assembly. And this time, we're going to keep it that way. After a period of intense effort, the reconstruction of the city showed significant progress. We worked tirelessly to restore our defenses, and soon, the streets regained their former bustle. Life for the common people was finally getting back on track. But Morongyao and I knew this was only the beginning. We still had a very long road ahead of us. With the city rebuilt, a new order emerged in the supernatural world. Morongyao and I drafted a series of regulations and policies to ensure that powers were used reasonably and that peace remained stable. We completely overhauled the curriculum at the Supernatural Academy. It wasn't just about combat anymore. We shifted the focus toward ethics and responsibility. We aren't just training powerful ability users, Morongyao told the crowd at the Academy's opening ceremony. We are cultivating citizens who carry a sense of duty and compassion. We also established a regulatory agency to oversee and manage the behavior of all supernatural beings. Any abuse of power would be met with severe punishment. However, establishing this new order wasn't easy. Some ability users were furious about the strict rules, claiming their freedom was being stripped away. "Why are there so many restrictions on us?" one man shouted during a public protest. "We have powers. We should have more freedom, not less." I stepped forward to address the crowd. "These laws aren't here to limit you," I explained calmly. "They are here to protect everyone and ensure a future for our entire world." The protests didn't stop. In fact, they grew louder. Morong Yao looked worried. "This can't go on," she whispered to me. "We have to find a way to address their concerns and solve their difficulties." I thought about it for a moment. Maybe we need to communicate better. We need them to understand the why behind the rules. We organized multiple forums to listen to their grievances while explaining why this new order was necessary for our survival. While we managed the social unrest, the economy remained in a slump. The war had devastated everything. Businesses were closed, and unemployment was skyrocketing. "We have to stimulate a recovery," I said. We rolled out economic policies, offering loans and subsidies to encourage innovation and startups. It was a rocky process. Some policies failed to hit the mark, and the results were disappointing at first. "We can't lose heart," Morong Yao encouraged the team. "We adjust, we refine, and we keep going." Slowly, the economy began to breathe again. People started to see hope on the horizon. But just as things were looking up, a new crisis arrived in the shadows. In a remote town far from the capital, a mysterious illness broke out. It started with fever and fatigue. Then, the victims' bodies would weaken until their supernatural powers spun out of control. "What is this disease?" a local doctor asked, staring at his patients in despair. "I've never seen anything like it." The news reached me and Morong Yao quickly. "Assemble a medical team immediately," I ordered. "Get them to that town now." A team of top-tier medical ability users rushed to the scene. They conducted exhaustive tests, but the cause remained a mystery. The head of the medical team reported back with grim news. "It seems linked to supernatural energy, but the exact mechanism is unknown." As time passed, the number of infected grew. It began spreading to neighboring regions. Panic gripped the public. People started whispering that another catastrophe was coming. Morong Yao and I worked to calm the masses while pouring every resource we had into research. "Whatever the cost, we find a cure," Morong Yao vowed. We discovered the disease was highly contagious and hit ability users much harder than ordinary people. It was a massive challenge. Our medical teams worked day and night, but every treatment failed. Just as hope was fading, a young medical ability user came forward with a bold idea. "Maybe we should stop looking at this as a biological illness and treat it as an energy imbalance," he suggested. It was a gamble, but it was all we had. We decided to follow his lead. The exploration was grueling. We tried using pure energy to regulate the patient's internal balance, but the initial results were disastrous. Some patients had violent reactions, and their conditions worsened. "Did we get it wrong?" the team asked, frustrated and exhausted. "Don't give up," I told them. "Every failure is just one step closer to the right answer." After countless trials and adjustments, we finally saw a breakthrough. Some patients' symptoms began to fade. Their strength returned. "It's working," the medics shouted, their faces lighting up with joy. But the danger wasn't over. The disease was still spreading faster than we could treat it. "We have to scale up," I said, "and we have to contain it." We mobilized every available medical user and enforced strict quarantine measures. We locked down cities and disinfected every public square. There was resistance, of course. Some residents tried to break through the cordons, terrified of being trapped. "Please stay calm," Morong Yao shouted, pleading with the crowds. "The quarantine is to protect you and the rest of the world." Eventually, the people listened. With their cooperation and our medical teams working around the clock, the tide turned. More and more patients were discharged from the hospitals. The spread finally slowed to a halt. We had won. The supernatural world erupted in cheers. Hope was back. But as I looked at Morong Yao, I knew we couldn't relax. We needed to take these lessons and fix our broken systems. We need better healthcare, better education, better everything. I said. Morong Yao nodded. Not just medicine. We need to advance in technology and culture too. We began drafting a long-term plan for a prosperous, harmonious world. We invested heavily in the academy, not just for elite warriors, but to teach every citizen the basics of energy management. We pushed for technological innovation to create green, smart energy applications to improve daily life. We even started cultural festivals to bridge the gap between different factions and races. We were building a future where we didn't just survive, we thrived. We have to make the supernatural world a place filled with love and hope, Morong Yao said. Under our leadership, the people gained a new sense of confidence. They worked harder than ever for a better future. New buildings sprouted up across the cities like bamboo shoots after a rain. Innovation centers hummed with the sound of discovery. Cultural festivals brought vibrant color to the streets, and for the first time in a long time, I saw people wearing genuine smiles. But I knew the road ahead was still long. Challenges were waiting for us in the shadows. I stood before the people and made a vow. As long as we stand together, no obstacle can stop us. Let's build our glory together. The world moved forward into a brighter era. But I realized that to truly change things, we had to start at the root. We needed education reform. I called a meeting with the top experts, scholars, and veteran teachers. The atmosphere in the room was heavy and serious. We have to break the old ways, a senior expert said. We can't just focus on combat training. We need to build character and creative thinking. Morong Yao nodded beside me. Exactly. We want students with powerful abilities, but also high morals and the ability to solve real-world problems. A teacher looked worried. That sounds great, but it requires massive resources. We need new textbooks, facilities, and teacher training. Resources aren't the problem, I replied. Courage is. We'll start with pilot schools and expand from there. We spent days debating the details. We added humanities, arts, and science to the curriculum. Students wouldn't just learn how to throw a fireball. They would learn history, philosophy, and physics. We threw out the old, boring lectures and encouraged group projects and independent thought. Morong Yao and I visited one of the pilot schools to see the progress. The classrooms were alive with debate. On the training grounds, the students were using their powers in ways I'd never seen before. This is what I wanted, I said, feeling a surge of pride. It's just the beginning, Morong Yao reminded me with a smile. It wasn't all easy. Some parents were skeptical. My kid needs to survive in this world, one father told me. Shouldn't he just focus on his combat skills? Power is important, I explained patiently. But a well-rounded education will take them further. We want them ready for any challenge, not just a fight. Morong Yao added that the new system actually made their powers more flexible and efficient. Eventually, the parents came around. The pilot schools were a massive success. The students were stronger, smarter, and more capable than the generations before them. We began rolling the program out across the entire world. While education was changing the people, technology was changing their lives. In a high-tech lab, researchers showed us a new device that boosted energy transmission efficiency. It was a game-changer. This will power our entire world more efficiently, the lead researcher said proudly. It's incredible, I said. But we have to be careful. Every new power comes with a risk. The world moved faster. Energy-driven cars were silent and swift. Communication was instant. Medical devices could heal wounds that used to be fatal. But the dark side emerged quickly. Criminals started using the new tech to steal secrets or build deadlier weapons. Meanwhile, automation was putting people out of work. We can't let technology become a weapon against us, I told the council. We need strict regulation. Morong Yao suggested we set up retraining centers for those who lost their jobs. We created a special regulatory department to vet every new invention. I even led a raid myself, busting a gang that was using the new network to scam thousands of people. Anyone using technology to harm others will be punished, I declared publicly. Morong Yao spent her days at the training centers, encouraging the workers. Learn these new skills, she told them. There is a place for everyone in this new age. Together, we balanced progress with safety, ensuring the technological leap didn't leave anyone behind. We successfully navigated the chaos of the tech boom. Technology and society were finally moving in the same direction. But as the world modernized, I realized something was missing. A world without a past has no soul. Morong Yao and I decided to focus on our roots. We traveled to an ancient town tucked away from the neon lights. The streets were paved with weathered stone. Every corner breathed history. I looked at the old buildings and felt a deep sense of responsibility. These traditions were our foundation. We couldn't let them wash away in the tide of progress. Morong Yao stood beside me, watching the locals. She said the younger generation needed to fall in love with their heritage. If they didn't, it would die with the elders. We didn't waste any time. We added traditional culture classes to the schools. I personally invited the oldest supernatural users to teach. They were living libraries. They shared stories of ancient battles and taught skills that weren't found in any manual. We launched the Supernatural Culture Festival. It was a massive celebration. There were traditional crafts, exotic foods, and performances that used powers in ways I'd never seen. I watched children running between the stalls, their eyes wide with wonder. An old man pointed to a display and smiled at a group of kids. He told them that this was their identity. It was a beautiful sight. But I knew we couldn't just live in the past. I encouraged the youth to innovate. I wanted them to blend the old ways with the new world. One young artist created a masterpiece. He used his supernatural energy to weave traditional painting techniques with modern digital tech. The result was breathtaking. Morong Yao was impressed. She said this kind of innovation kept our culture alive and relevant. We didn't stop there. We opened our borders for cultural exchanges. We invited artists and scholars from other worlds to visit us. Our culture was finally stepping onto the global stage. It wasn't just about surviving anymore. We were truly living.